2022 Evanston Preservation Commission meeting. We have a quorum of, we have 8 commissioners present, so we have a quorum. It is 7:02 p.m. And I'm just briefly going to go through the meeting procedures. I know most of you here probably are already familiar with these procedures, but we have 3 cases on the agenda. Staff will read the case into record, and then we will ask the presenter to please step up to the podium, introduce yourself, and then you can present your application to the commission. I believe there is a pointer and a remote at the podium to help you guide through your presentation. The commissioners will then ask questions for your presentation, which then you obviously can respond to. And then we will ask for any public comment. And then we will ask you to take your seat, and the commission will deliberate, and we will eventually call a motion for either to approve, not approve, or continue the case. So, with that said, I would ask Mr. Sterling to please read the first case into record.
1334 Asbury Avenue, a landmark in the Ridge Historic District. Case number 22 PRES 0189. Paul Dovidatis, owner and applicant, submits for a certificate of appropriateness to alter the home's fenestration at the north and west elevations, remove a chimney to the roof line, infill the partially enclosed recessed porch at the home's west elevation, and construct a wood frame deck at the home's rear volume. And I think your architect is here. Douglas, are you here? Step up to the podium, and then you can direct me to go through the slides here. They're the same materials that you sent me.
And you said there's a pointer here somewhere, or? I don't know if I'll need it, but. Okay, just in case. Good evening. My name is Douglas Hammond. I'm an architect here in the suburbs, working with homeowners Paul and Deanna Dovidatis, and our interior designer Denise Hauser is also here. Our clients are asking to do a remodel of their kitchen in the northwest quadrant of their residence, which today unfortunately has a large chimney kind of in the middle of it, and requires that we do a lot of circulation around it. Creates a couple of secondary paths around a otherwise very small kitchen. So our interior designer has come up with a really nice layout that creates an island in the middle, removes the chimney from the center of that space, and creates a more modern, large, open plan type of kitchen in that same quadrant. So one of our first asks will be the removal of an ancillary chimney towards the back of the house. There is a decorative double chimney on the front of the house that has a double fluted clay decorative cap on it. That's obviously part of the original design. The one that we're looking at removing has a small metal cap. It's obviously a very secondary or ancillary type of detail on that. So it's and you can see kind of in the top elevation that the comparison of the two. That the one on the right is the one that we're asking to be removed. Also on that north elevation, which is the top drawing, faces. I'm sorry, Paul. What street is that? Greenwood. It faces Greenwood. The front of the house faces Asbury, and it's at it's a corner lot at that intersection. So the two windows in the kitchen area, which is the right side of the center or the ground level plane of this facade, are about 30 inches off the floor. The sill is about 30 inches off the floor, and a standard countertop is about 36 inches off the floor. Today there's a countertop that's below or above the sill height, so that drops considerably where there's a space that things just sort of fall into, and you can also see the countertop from the outside of the house. Our next ask is that those windows be replaced, generally in kind, but just raising that sill height from about 30 inches to 40 inches so we can get it just above the countertop, and maintaining sort of the configuration and everything of the existing windows, but making that work for the kitchen, both from the inside and the outside of the building. And then as we go to the rear of the house, which is the west facade, faces the neighbor's garage just a few feet away. There's presently a pocket, a porch, that's has a balcony that, or stair and a balcony that comes up to it. In, excuse me, in reconfiguring the kitchen, we're looking at taking that porch space, because again, we're looking at a series of small spaces, creating a mud room in that space, and then taking the current mud room, which is very small, and creating a little bit larger pantry in that space. So I don't know if we have a floor plan here, and I don't know if it matters, but the reconfiguration picks up a little bit of square footage by picking up that very narrow porch. It's too small to put furniture on. It really doesn't get used at all. So we're asking to move that wall out, replace generally 2 windows in kind and a door in kind. Again, just moving them out to the outer plane. And then in order to get the stair landing to work and the door to work, we need to extend the deck and the balustrade a short distance, so that we balance the windows, the doors, and sort of the relationship of everything on that facade. Again, that's the rear of the house that faces the neighbors. It is visible slightly from the street, so we're addressing it as part of our design. And I think that's it really for.
The windows on
Oh, and then, yeah, there's presently, just, I believe they're all fixed windows, or they casement like this? Okay, they're casement windows, but they're large. These were added in the 1990, I believe, or at least in the 1990s. That whole addition, that sunroom addition, was added. It's not really in context with the rest of the house. But we are asking to take those 6 windows and put in either casement or double hung or even fixed windows that would have that center divider, so it looks more similar to the rest of the house that has all the double hung or the 2/2 windows. So there's 6 of those that we'd like to replace as well. Is that it?
Okay, thank you. I have actually one quick question. So you have the 1/1 lights for the sunroom and for the windows that you're doing on the north, and then I noticed at the porch on the west, you're doing a vertical simulated divided light to get the 2/2. It seems like those are the only windows on the home that have that configuration. Was there a reason behind choosing to do that there?
Yeah, actually, they're not the only ones. You can see on the north facade that's a 2/2 in the kitchen. So in the kitchen today, there's only 4 windows. One of them on the north and one of them on the west has that 2/2 divide. I believe our drawing is incorrect in the representation of that, but we're just picking up on that 2/2 on the larger scale windows, and it's specifically in the kitchen where we're dealing with end of corridor sight lines and things where it becomes a little more intricate and focused.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Are there any other questions by commissioners?
Yeah, hello.
Hi.
For the rear of the elevation with the newer, I think the solarium, is there any scope of work for the 2 what appears to be glass block windows on either side of the fireplace? Is there scope for those as well?
Is it what also?
Is there any scope for those other windows? I know you're replacing the 6 that go all the way
Yeah,
up
actually
top, but-
replacing those 2
Oh, okay.
angled ones with that have the 1990s glass block look.
Right, right.
With the double hung look, or at least either casement or double hung, but
Okay.
that look.
They're
yeah.
included. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Any other questions by commissioners?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Hi. The windows that we were just speaking of with the 6 and then the 2 little ones, those are casements now? And is that,
Those are casements now or fixed?
Yeah, they're
okay,
casements, yeah.
and you're replacing them with casements with a simulated meeting rail, is that right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Is there anything else that you guys would like to add, or we're, okay?
Okay, if there are no other questions, why don't you take a seat,
Thank you.
and we'll deliberate probably fairly quickly here. So anything commissioners would like to discuss on this case? Do you have a question? If you can please come up to the podium and just introduce yourself, just for the record, please.
My name is Denise Hauser, and the windows on that are in the kitchen now are the 2/2. They're large windows, and they are original. So that's why we're copying them on the side and the back.
Okay, thank you. Would commissioners like to discuss anything on this case, or are we ready to make a motion? If we're ready for a motion, would someone like to take a stab on that? John?
Sure. Regarding 1334 Asbury Avenue, landmark in the Ridge Historic District, case 22 Pres 0189. Paul Doviadatis, owner and applicant, submits for a certificate of appropriateness to alter the home's fenestration at the north and west elevations, remove an ancillary chimney to the roof line, and fill the partially enclosed recess porch at the home's west elevation, and construct a wood frame deck at the home's rear volume. I move that we approve as submitted, applicable standards, alteration 1 through 10, and construction 1 through 5, 7, 10, and 12 through 13.
Is there a second?
A second.
Carl seconds. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. That motion carries 8-0. Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay. Cade, would you like to read the next case into record, please?
1215 Judson Avenue in the Lakeshore Historic District, 22 PRES 0187. Studio Tallow Architects applicant submits for a certificate of appropriateness to construct a single-story addition and open deck at the rear volume of the residence. Applicable standards, alteration 1 through 10, construction 1 through 5, 7 through 8, and 10 through 15. I think I saw Thomas. There he is.
Good evening. So I am Thomas Olivan, the owner of Studio Tallow Architecture and the architect for this addition at 1215 Judson. The project is a zoning compliant addition. It's a very straightforward project from a preservation point of view because there are basically no changes to the existing home. We're removing a small wood rear stair and concrete patio and replacing it with a one-story addition with a pitched roof. The roof is 412 that matches the roof pitch of the front porch. The addition includes a kitchen on the north, a family room on the south, and a built-in banquette that's sort of tucked into the existing part of the house. The side entry is reconfigured on the interior, no changes to the exterior, to create a mudroom with a little bit of storage. The materials are wood lap siding to match the existing, including mitered corners, aluminum-clad Marvin Ultimate windows, and the roof is a standing seam metal roof. It also includes, as you could see there, the deck with composite decking and steel railings.
Thomas, did you say what that railing was? Did I miss that?
It's a steel railing.
Thank you.
I guess one thing it's obvious from looking at it, but I forgot to mention that the base of the addition is brick and carries around the brick that's at the front of the house with a water table that matches the existing in terms of its size.
Do commissioners have any questions?
I would like to know a little bit more about the decision process for the railing on the back volume. So you've got the roof slope that matches the slope of the front porch. Why not carry that a little bit further?
Well, it's an addition, and we wanted to make reference to the front of the house. We didn't want to repeat it, so we have a different roof material. And one of the priorities for the project really is to have a better connection to the backyard, thus the windows, and a more open railing system.
Yeah, I would describe the vocabulary of the addition as mid-century modern, and I'm wondering why you didn't look for more elements beyond the brick and the wood siding to refer back to the scale and the character of the existing house. For instance, the two windows, which are over the counter for the sink, are awning windows, and I understand that because reaching across the counter to try and lift a double hung is difficult to do, but I'm wondering, for instance, why you wouldn't add a horizontal mutton to scale them and subdivide them like the two double hung windows in that same zone on the house. And I would say the same thing about the windows on the other side. Is there some reason why you chose not to do something that simple?
Sure. As you all know, every project is a collaboration between the designer and the owners. And something that was important to the owners was to have as much light and openness. And in fact, the interior character of the kitchen will be modern. It'll feel like a kitchen from the 21st century. And so having a false check rail just didn't seem to fit with that interior. And because we were doing punched openings and matching all of the materials and the trim, we felt like it didn't need to be a slavish reproduction of the front of the house.
I have a question about the basement level windows. I noticed that on one side, then they go down below to the ground level, and the other ones match the existing sill height of the other basement windows. Is that an egress requirement, or?
Egress and building code, and
Yeah,
just
okay.
getting as much light and air.
Yeah, okay.
Hi, Thomas.
Yep.
Similar to Commissioner Cohn's question, I'm looking at the detailing of the addition, and I'm going to guess that the windows above the doors were largely client-driven in terms of more openness, et cetera. And
Yeah. I mean, the idea was to have a single-story addition with as much light and air as possible and connection to the backyard. So that's the decision for the fenestration.
where my mind went was repeating the beam / freeze board of the front porch across the front, but that would certainly impact the amount of light you'd be getting in those upper transom windows.
Right, yeah, there's clearly a transition at the back of the house. The sides have the same materials as the sides of the existing home, and the proportions of the openings are the same, but a little bit different, right, because we don't have the check rail. And by the time you get around to the back, the roof pitch matches the front, but it reflects their needs. It reflects the needs of the owners.
So, why are you concerned about matching the roof pitch when you don't see those pitches together, whereas you're not concerned about continuity between the divisions in the windows, where in instances where you do, in fact, visually see that relationship?
That roof might be the most studied roof that my office has undertaken. We looked at a number of options from very modern and flat to moving the windows on the second floor to get a pitch that would be greater. Where we landed was I think, a really nice balance between reflecting some part of the house, which is the pitch of the front porch, and providing the airiness that they wanted in the space without disrupting existing windows on the second floor, which a steeper pitch would have done.
I have a quick question. What was the decision process for one side extending into the side yard beyond the side elevation of the home and the other side being inset?
It's strictly zoning. To get the, a kitchen that works with the family room, the proportions that work well, with the side setbacks that we had, the existing home doesn't, it doesn't meet the setbacks. So the addition does.
So what you're saying is that the setback on the, I don't know the cardinal directions, but on the,
So let me,
yeah,
did some,
I mean, the setback at the top is up against the zoning setback, and when you expand it down, I can't see that.
yeah, so we're
And-
within a half an inch of the setbacks on the north and the south.
On
So you
both
can see
sides.
the.
Okay, so you've maxed out the footprint. Got it.
Can you go back to the 3D drawings, please?
Do which one?
The 3D drawings?
Oh, sure.
Can you go over how all the aspects of the addition meet the standards of construction briefly? Because all that I hear from you was that you work with your clients, they have a idea what the addition would look like, and I have issues with the roof material, the proportion of the windows. I don't think that the addition is compatible with the house. It's a nice addition by itself, but I just have trouble with the whole volume.
Sure. So the items under construction were 1 through 8, 10 through 15. The addition has a compatible height is the first item. The proportions of the facade we felt made sense with the existing house.
In what regard? In which way?
The facade.
Yeah, what about
proportions.
3 and 4?
So if we, I think the proportions of the facade, given the mass that we're trying to achieve, are, you can see that there's 2 windows in a rectangle, and we have 2 windows in a rectangle, so I guess that's what I meant. The rhythm, let's see, so that was the third point under construction, the proportions of the openings, the rhythm of solid to void. Seems to work. The rhythm of volume to adjacent volumes doesn't seem to be particularly relevant. The volume of entrances and porches, it's an addition, it's not new construction, so that's a little bit different. Relationship of materials and textures, item 8 under new construction, we're pretty much, with the exception of the roof, matching them.
Yeah.
Number 10, the scale of the structure. It's similar to the front porch. It's not dwarfing the house. It doesn't look oddly small next to the house, in my opinion. That's number 10, scale of the structure. Number 11, the directional character. So it's not like we've got a prairie house that we're doing a vertical addition to. It seems like the eave line carries across like it does on the front porch. Number 12, we're not disturbing the presence of distinguishing qualities. You can see that's the back of the house.
Mhm.
I don't think Evanston will be worse for that facade being a little bit different.
Does the back of the house meet 3 and 4, and does it need to? Is it visible from a public way?
There is an alley, so again, technically, if you look between the garages, you can see it, yep.
Okay.
So, yeah, the proportions of the openings, obviously, those are bigger doors and windows than on the rest of the house. Our interpretation of the addition was once you get to the back, it's more like a porch. So that's why we have the larger openings that kind of refer back to the front porch where you have the big open spaces between the columns. I think I was down to number 13. We have not disturbed any archaeological resources. Number 14 says that innovative design should not be discouraged when the existing structure isn't lessened or disturbed in any way. And I guess if we're going to say that there's an innovative element to this fairly straightforward project, it would be that there's a cathedral ceiling with a bit of glass that again refers to
Would
the
have
idea
been
of a porch.
innovative in the 40s, I guess.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, that, I've always thought that that requirement and that statement were kind of questionable as to what innovation is, and I just made a snide comment for which I'll repeat and then apologize for, which is that this would have been innovative in the 1940s.
Okay. Point number 15 is that it should be possible to remove the addition at some point in the future without harming the existing structure, and it's very simply attached to the back, so no problem there. So that's the new construction items that you were talking about.
Thank you very much.
I also am hung up a little bit on construction standards 3 and 4, and I think if the meaning was to move to the back and have it feel more like a back porch, then you could take the roof and maybe overhang the rest of the porch or something so it has some sort of an open volume associated with it instead of the glass being right at the front plane, and that might help that be a little bit easier to read.
I'm sorry, was there a question?
Just for deliberation with my
Oh, okay.
other commissioners.
Just to clarify, so you were saying to like extend the roof to the edge of the deck, right?
Well, that would make more sense to me
Right.
with the comment that the back was supposed to feel more like, once you get to the back volume, it's supposed to feel more like a porch, because I'm not getting that based on where we're currently at.
Right, because then those windows and doors wouldn't be as visible, right? Okay.
Yeah, just to be clear, it wasn't supposed to be a porch, just the feeling was supposed to be a bit more porch-like than.
Yeah, I get it, but if you're going to use that as part of the ammunition for meeting one of the standards, then it should be readable to us.
Fair enough.
Are there any other questions for Thomas? Beth?
Yeah, I had just a quick, kind of similar to Carlos's request, just to respond to the requirements for alteration. Just one that's kind of sticking for me is number 3. Could you just respond to that one?
Proportion of openings?
It would be for alterations.
Oh,
It's,
alterations, that was construction, sorry.
yeah,
So
exactly.
alterations
Number
3
3.
is, building is a product of its time?
No, all properties, structures, sites, and objects shall be recognized as products of their own time.
Yeah.
And then the next sentence, alterations to sites, buildings, structures, or objects that have no historic basis shall be discouraged. And that's just sticking for me because the materials. Can you just talk a little bit more about the material selection and references, or not? Or,
Sure. No, as I was preparing for this, I made sure to note all of these items that we're responsible for. And I think that was probably the one that I had the hardest time in English understanding. So I'm not sure how to respond to this one because I still don't understand it, but I can answer your question, which is to respond to the materials. Yeah, there was no desire for the addition to stand out, to be particularly different. I mean, I think at one point we talked about fiber cement siding, which this board has approved a number of times. They felt it was important that walking around the house, it should feel like the house, and so and this is obviously more expensive than fiber cement siding, doing wood lap siding with mitered corners, not just the material, but finding the craftspeople to do that well. Yeah, and the brook, so it's a combination. It's not, like I said, it's not a slavish imitation of the front of the house. It refers to it, it wants to fit in with the house, and it finds a few places to do something slightly different, which is the roof, and the, letting generous light into the back of the house with the windows.
Just to be devil's advocate here, I would suggest that given the great number of people building traditional houses or doing additions to houses, that actually use the details of the existing house, which is sort of a little bit like what you've done, that number 4, I think, is kind of meaningless, because if there are a lot of people doing it, then how is it not a product of its time?
Are there any other questions by commissioners? Why don't you take a seat?
Yeah, thank you for your time.
Let's discuss. So, a lot of comments have been stated, obviously concerns about the windows, the proportions, solids to voids. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on what Cade had mentioned about I don't exactly know how to describe it, but how the addition is offset and it is past the edge of the house. Like, that also seems to stand out to me as something that it just seems like it could be a little bit shorter and fit in a little bit better. With I guess I was thinking of number 2 for the new construction standard. The relationship of the width to the height of the facade should be visually compatible with property structures, sites, public ways, objects, etc. So that, I just wanted to echo what Cade said. I also, that was a concern for me. And that picture doesn't show it, but from the front, there's a picture, well, I don't know what slide, but you can see it from the front as well. Not that one. Oh, yeah, to the right. That's right. Yeah.
Okay, a couple things. I mean, first of all, the alteration standards, bath numbers 2 and 3, clearly they're written to relate to alterations of existing structures, so that.
Can you turn on your mic, Mark? Oh. Okay, never mind.
I mean, the idea is that if you put basically an ahistorical alteration, something that's, say, taking something on that was not in the original house and adding it because it looks like something historical. So, I mean, I think it's really, for the addition is all new construction, so I think you can only apply the standards for new construction. As to those, I guess I do share the other commissioners' comments on the kind of just difficult time visually relating the addition to the rest of the house. The proportion of openings is the most dramatic difference. But again, I think there's a lot of alternatives. But actually, what really threw me, I have to confess, is I think the last project you presented pretty recently had an analogous design, not too different. And I really just kind of emotionally had, maybe because I'd just seen it, something similar you'd done in another house, it really made it seem very detached from this house for me. And I really had trouble seeing any relationships between the addition and the house. I mean, again, the proportions, the openings is the most dramatic item that's easily identifiable in the standards. But it's just generally, and I think it goes back to some of the things Commissioner Cohn was saying, is there may just be more subtle things you could do that create more of a relationship. But it just seems to me like this is just kind of almost wholly detached from relationships from the rest of the house.
So,
I was just going to reiterate the fact that actually going from setback to setback, because it shifts with respect to the side walls of the house, gives the addition, for better or worse, more of the feeling of a box or a piece that's just been pushed onto or added onto the back of the house. And I think that added to sort of some of the other comments that commissioners have made tonight makes this not as successful as some of the other work that you've presented to us.
So to kind of summarize what we've talked about is, I'm hearing that standards 2, 3, construction standards 2, 3, and 4 have been referenced, specifically relating to the alignment of the new addition to the existing home, the proportions of the solids to voids, and I would assume the proportion of the openings and how it relates. I know, Stuart, you brought up the configuration of the windows and how they related to the existing windows. Are there other comments that commissioners would like to?
So I just want to state that I do not object to the massing even shifted to one side of the house. These old houses do quirky things like that all the time. I think he's handled that successfully. I think the materiality is compatible in my eyes. The roof pitch is okay. I think I'm still stuck on the proportion of the openings though, standard 3.
What about the materials? I know that was brought up as well, the material of the roof, materials of the railings. Do commissioners have concerns with that, or is that?
I think I'm a little stuck there. I like that the siding is carried out. I like that the foundation is carried through. So I see the continuity there. I think it's a combination of the horizontal steel railing and then the vertical lines of the standing seam roof. I think all of that combined, and then along with the casement windows versus the double hung, I think it's just kind of the layers of that aren't working. If it was one or two of those elements, I think it could work great.
Is that idea shared by commissioners, that if it is the multiple items that are creating the issues as opposed to just one specific item? It sounds like the idea that we would like to see this case come back, addressing standards 2, 3, and 4, and I guess the relationship of the materials, which would be standard 7.
Susie, Tom wants to.
Come on up, Tom, please.
So in brief consultation with my owners, they're open to a shingle roof and false check rails, if that addresses 2 of the items, I think. So the windows would be more like the front, and the shingles would be more like the front.
Okay, so the windows on the sides would mimic the double hungs?
Yep.
And there would be a shingle roof, which would remove the standing seam metal roof on the back. So that addresses a couple of the items. I think the things remaining then would be the proportion of the openings and the compatibility of the doors and the windows on the rear facade of the porch. Is that something that the commissioners still feel does not meet the standards, or what is the consensus?
No, I think it's important that I mean, I think Beth actually said it well, is that it's kind of the totality of the elements that, don't meet the standards because they really don't have a sufficient relationship to the existing structure. I think it's a mistake for us to try to I mean, we've pointed out specific things that might be changed, but I think it's really up to the applicant to design. I mean, if they can use some of the vocabulary of the house in other ways that they prefer to do, I don't think we should originally tell them A, B, C, D, and E have to be changed.
Could I just make one small point, with your permission? Commissioner Simon, this design is very similar to another house that we presented recently, and the concern with that was the proportion of the openings of the windows. The proportions of this project are almost exactly the same. It doesn't have the arched window, but the amount of wall on the sides and the amount of window is almost exactly the same. So I think it is incumbent upon you all to provide a bit more guidance if we can present a very similar design that is receiving a different level of scrutiny.
That's the whole point, is it's a different house. And your job to meet the standards is to present something with relationship to this house, not any generic house.
But you were,
We don't expect you to come back with the same design for every house and say, if my design was approved for a house that looks much different than this one.
absolutely, of course. But that particular concern that you had, that this board had, which was the proportion of glass to solid, is also an issue here. So I'm trying to find the consistency in the concern among the commissioners.
You know, I think doing additions is infinitely more difficult than doing new construction. And I think we all understand the back of the house and the desire to have a room that opens almost completely and visually to a deck, allows people to go out. These are sort of the trademarks of 20th and 21st century architecture. So for me, the intellectual challenge of trying to do that is, in fact, figuring out how to subdivide it or how to scale it or how to transform it so that it both is a new element in terms of what something this house never would have had, and a transformation of the idea and the forms and the details of the house into the 21st century. And that's a big challenge. I very rarely see things that actually take that on as an intellectual challenge and figure out how to do it. I mean, for me, looking at that, I thought the suggestion of carrying the roof out a little bit and giving it some of the quality of being a porch as a way to mitigate the fact that the whole back of the house reads as all glass, or if you will, as all void. I think it would help to take the door divisions and run them up through the triangular window in the gable end. But again, as Mark said, this is your project for you to figure out and for you to design. And, I don't want to, and I don't think anybody else here really wants to tell you how to solve those issues.
Thank you.
I'm wondering if my fellow commissioners sort of unanimously feel like the issue of the addition being slid, not aligned with the existing main house is an issue, because again, if he's coming back, I would like to take that off the table. I think it's okay the way it is, but I'm just wondering how the rest of the commission feels.
I think it would be better integrated into the house if the side wall were continued and the other side set back, but I think that it's totally unreasonable and beyond our scope of comment to ask the owner to diminish the size of their, of their family room by whatever that is, 3.5 or 4 feet. So I would concur with John, and I think maybe that's ultimately is either a non-issue or something that we shouldn't pass judgment on, in spite of how we feel about it.
I was just going to say, I think it should be changed. I think it's fine off-center, because I think it repeats the front is off-center. The front porch is also not aligned with the gable on top. But, I mean, just a personal opinion, I'd like to see it come in more, because you can see it from the front, and that is our job, to evaluate what things look like from the public way, the street, the sidewalk, et cetera. So, I mean, that's my point of view on it.
I do not get the consensus that this project is going to, I feel that the commission would like to see this application come back with some modifications. I Again, just to reiterate, standards 2, 3, and 4 have been noted with the alignment of the addition, the proportions of the openings, and the rhythms of the solids to voids. And I do think that they have given quite a bit of feedback to help you come back with some modifications. So if it is the consensus of the commission, if someone would like to make a motion to continue this, what is the date of the next meeting? If that is what everybody would like to see.
The next meeting date is November 8th.
So would one of the commissioners please make a motion to continue this case?
Move the case for 1215 Judson Avenue, case 22 Pres 0187 by Studio Tallow Architects to the November 8th meeting.
Is there a second? Mark, second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 8-0. Thank you, Thomas. And I'm sure Kate and Carlos will be happy to discuss with you. Okay. Mr. Sterling, would you please read the next case into record?
The next case is 1453 Maple Avenue, a landmark outside of a historic district, case number 22 PRES 0173. Majewski Architects applicant submit for a certificate of appropriateness to alter the structure's south, north, and east elevations fenestration, construct a single-story trash enclosure at the east elevation, construct an accessible lift at the west elevation, and install rooftop mechanicals on the northeast corner's rearmost 30 feet. The applicant further requests the following major zoning variations to complete adaptive use to multifamily residential. 24 dwelling units where 14 are permitted, zoning code section 6884, a rear yard setback of 0 feet where 25 feet is required, and 7.5 feet is the existing legally nonconforming condition, zoning code section 6887, and 10 leased off-street parking spaces or a parking ratio of 0.27 per bed where 19 spaces or a ratio of 0.55 per bed is required. Zoning code section 61635, table 16B. Applicable standards alteration 1 through 10, and construction 1 through 8 and 10 through 15. The commission is the determining body for their certificate of appropriateness and makes a recommendation to the Land Use Commission for the major zoning variations. And I think, Adam, will you be presenting?
Commissioner Jacobs?
Chair Reinhold, I just want to announce that I'll be recusing myself from this case so as to avoid the perception of a conflict of interest as I was previously employed by the applicant.
Okay. And I would like to remind the commission that our purview only applies to the exterior of the building. They have provided quite a bit of information for the project, so just keep that in mind when the presentation is being given. Go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Adam Bro. I may get some help at some point in this presentation from my colleague Mike Karkowski here. We're both of Majewski Architects. And generally about our project, of course, we all know the Masonic Temple has stood vacant for a number of years. It's obviously, built by Halliburton and Roche, an important architect here in the area in 1926. And our clients are looking to make an adaptive use project out of the former temple into multifamily residential. Right, so of course our building is on the, it's eligible for the National Register and is a local landmark here in Evanston. Again, designed by Halliburton and Roche. We kind of included in our presentation some contemporary and historic images. Not sure what happened to that guy on the bottom left there. That was a historic image where you can see the context around this building sort of changing. But our project seeks to really act with a very light touch on the exterior. We're kind of only touching things that we feel are really, really needed to make this into a multifamily building. And I hope you'll agree with us on that point. So here we see some shots, some important things to note. On the bottom, the image on the bottom right, our building has sort of the basement. There is habitable space sort of in the setback out to 0 lot line. And a portion of that basement is kind of protruding up above grade is what you see there. And I'll point out later in the presentation that we're trying to cut that down, just kind of cut that protrusion down, although we are adding also a volume back there. Top left image, the north elevation, very bare, brick, also 0 lot line. And then the 2 elevations that are primarily visible from the public way are the south elevation, which you see a bit of on the right. Let's go one back. The image in the top left there, that's the west facade and front, and then the south facade on the top right. So we, along with the owners, we wanted to kind of preserve this entry experience, although the lobby itself is not part of the landmark distinction. We feel it's important to kind of just extend that experience of the historic building, the public way, into this semi-public area. So we're seeking to preserve most, maybe not that conduit there, but most of all the historic aspects of this lobby here. Okay, you can kind of get a feel for how the building is going to be divided on the interior by having a look at this section. In the basement, you can see that we are providing some units down there, and that includes cutting light wells off to the side of the south elevation. Other than that, it's kind of, we're creating these kind of high-spaced units with mezzanine between them to try to take advantage of these large windows that we have, for example, on the south facade. Feel like it would be a shame to kind of cut it off or to lose a lot of floor space. And so we're kind of, along with the owners, going for this lofted kind of feel in the interior. All right, just point out from the existing and proposed elevations. Here on the front, we're doing very little. It's just replacing the fenestrations of the windows in kind with wood windows from Marvin to match the historic profiles. Those windows at the top are, I believe they're in-swinging casement windows. And the 2 that you see on the bottom, kind of flanking the columns, are a casement with a fixed transom. And then the major change to the front is to provide an accessible wheelchair lift, which is what you see kind of the bottom left of that bottom drawing. And we kind of went back and forth about how we were going to handle the accessible entrance. And in the end, we feel it's only fair that someone using a wheelchair would enter the building in the same way along the front that anyone else would. We did kind of investigate an entry in the rear, kind of through the alley, and in the end felt that just wasn't equal. So this change is going to require cutting down a bit of the plinth. You can see kind of on the right side of the elevation, you see that what the original, or let's say the contemporary condition of the plinth looks like. Just slightly taller masonry, and then each side has a light that's not really original to the building. So it's going to require cutting down the plinth, adding this wheelchair lift that we feel it would be appropriate that it's mostly glass, so that's kind of what we're going for here, a glass wheelchair lift. And although the manufacturers of these lifts kind of recommend that you do a taller, like a ceiling or roof on top of these things, we're trying to avoid as much bulk, kind of as little bulk as we can. And so it's just an open top. It doesn't have a roof on it, Okay, just pointing out the changes here on the south facade. The windows on the ground level, these tall, slender ones, they're just being replaced in kind with wood Marvin windows to match the historic profile. And then on the second level there, you can see in the historic drawing, or the existing elevation rather, that they're kind of this masonry, this detailed, ornamented, it's got like a wreath figure on it. Well, we're proposing to replace that shape, that square shape, with a double casement window. And in the rear, we are proposing to add a trash volume that will handle the trash needs of the building. And off to the right of that, on the rear elevation, we're trying to point out that we would be cutting down that little portion of the basement that protrudes up. And that also allows for an accessible egress, because you'll see in another drawing, there's a door from the stairwell that's also exiting through that trash volume. Existing elevation on the north, this is not visible from the public way, or maybe you get a sliver of it from the alley. Here we feel we're able to provide more openings, some balconies, as well as just windows for the units. You can kind of see all the elements of the project coming together in these axon views. You can see the wheelchair lift on the left, on the front. Those windows that were previously a wreath detail. And I suppose it's worth pointing out we're removing the mechanical equipment, which formerly is in the alley. It's kind of sitting on top of that basement protrusion at the moment. We're proposing to move all the mechanical equipment up to the roof, off to the north elevation where it would not be seen from the public way. Oh, and I suppose the last thing to point out on the south elevation is that surrounding those light wells are a steel guardrail that would be seen from the sidewalk in the south elevation. Just a quick overview of the plans. The existing plan, of course, is an event space. It's got large event halls in the ground and basement level. And those are going to be filled in with new floors, new framing. Here's the basement level where we kind of preserve more or less the assembly hall in the north with a amenity area. And along the south, where we were talking about the light wells before, are where we have units. First floor, and like I said, these are kind of lofted units, so you see a stairwell in each unit that, on the south side especially, takes advantage of those large windows. On the north, you can see we're kind of cutting into the building a little, providing a small balcony for some of these units. And you can see, you can kind of start to see how the trash volume would work. I believe a previous iteration that Cade may have seen involved the trash chute, but we've since cut it down to just a trash, only a ground level room where you walk out down the stairs and you access it through a door to dispose of your trash. Moving up the building, you can start to see these mezzanine levels. It's open to below areas in the mezzanine. And here we are on the upper level where these units kind of we're kind of going to open up the ceiling in the third floor. You kind of get a little bit of the structure of the building because you're in the room here where like the trusses are above. You're kind of in this almost warehousey feel. Just getting into a bit more detail on the south facade, so you can see about how we're treating those wreath masonry details with the new windows, trying to respect the existing windows that are there. You see below there, those windows are in-swinging casements with a transom. And then above there, we're looking to do something similar where it's a casement. I believe we go with outswinging on the upper windows. Along those light wells, we do need to provide some fall protection. And so we're proposing a steel black painted guardrail that would be more similar to what has been in the area, historically. I apologize, it actually looks like the image on the left hasn't been updated. It looks like it's showing aluminum proportions, but the section is actually correct. It should be showing steel proportions where we have like a 1-inch square profiles, and the intermediate verticals are, I believe, they're 3/4 of an inch. So just trying to get a slender steel profile rather than what you see more contemporary aluminum that is typically built in new construction. Okay, zooming in a little more detail, a little more diagrammatic. On the bottom left, we're trying to show about how we're cutting down to the alley grade, that protrusion. And you can get a look at that door, which is the egress door from the stair, in white on the boat. It's showing in white at the moment, at least in the picture in the bottom right. The proposed trash room would have a roll-up door as well. And I believe the owners would, I don't want to say if this is not correct. Is there someone to roll the trash out, or is it access to the door? You pull it out, yeah. You pull up the roll-up door, or you access the roll-up door and you pull the carts out. You can get a little bit of detailed plan view of the trash room there on the left, enough to fit 2, I believe 3-yard carts, and some recycling bins as well. And you can see how you come down the stairs as a resident. You're in this little kind of egress lobby, and then you have access to open that other door, which gets you into the trash room, where you can get to the cart or the recycling bins. And one last thing I wanted to mention is that Cade mentioned in his introduction about the setback, the current setback being about 7.5 feet. I believe that is measuring to the tall volume of the building, but I just wanted to reiterate that the basement volume that protrudes up is at 0 lot line. Of course, it's only a couple feet off the ground, and so, Cade does, and I'm sure his colleagues don't believe that it should have been counted towards setback. I just wanted to point out that the building kind of exists on that 0 lot line. We're cutting most of it down and then building the trash room volume up high. Onto the front facade. This image on the right is a basis of design for our wheelchair lift. And, there are some black metal details in the building, so we feel black maybe is a more appropriate color. As much glass as possible to just kind of be light in terms of the intrusion of the front facade. And you access through, we would build like a little pathway that slightly slopes upward toward the wheelchair lift. That way, and it turns 90 degrees. That way you can enter the lift and exit in the same direction. And what that does is it allows the wheelchair lift to be a little less bulky. If you had to enter the wheelchair lift in one direction and then turn 90 degrees, that would require a bulkier, wider lift. And so that also kind of goes hand in hand with cutting down, the way we're cutting the plinth just a bit down. And so also we're providing this glass guardrail just to be as light as possible about how we touch the front facade. Just a little diagram on top of the historic photo about how the plinth would be minorly cut down. Plan view. Like I say, you enter from the same direction that you exit. You get kind of just enough of a landing up on the podium. Okay, so here's just some minor other details that is happening with the front facade. We'll refurbish the door, the existing wood door, restore other elements like these handrails. There's some repair that needs to be done with the top of the podium, as it is actually part of the exterior envelope. There's some basement space below there. You can see some of the waterproofing is starting to kind of fail, so we'll refurbish that. There's a bunch of inset lighting, kind of recessed lighting. And so we'll restore those. Probably they'll become LEDs or rewired, but the intent is to basically leave them as they are and restore them as much as it takes for them to function. And that's all I have.
I just want one point of clarification, that north elevation is actually quite visible from Maple, because that building to the north is pushed back quite a bit, so that's just a point of clarification for the commissioners. And then would you also mind going through the variations that you're requesting quickly, and then kind of describe why you feel they're necessary for the adaptive use?
Sure. Okay. So I believe the first and probably the most, the variation that has the most impact on the building is the variation to the allowable units. We, basically, in order to make the building viable, we got to have a certain amount of units in the building. And we feel, and we made the case to the variation board, that help me out here, Kate. Do we have that? I'd like to see the variation.
Well, I mean, one thing that might be interesting is, would the adaptive use of it, or would the character and quality of the alterations that you're proposing, would that be possible with less units? That's because the standards that we'll make our recommendation on are a little bit different than the standards that like the Land Use Commission will use. So basically, this commission is going to look at whether those variations that are requested are necessary or in the interest of historic preservation in order to adapt the structure.
Understood. Okay, my name is Michael Karkowski. I know Adam briefly introduced me in the beginning. I've been working with him on this project. There's nothing more sustainable than reusing an existing building. And right now, although this is an adaptive reuse, the building is located in an R6. It is in a residential district. So the adaptive reuse is 100% appropriate for the neighborhood because it's a residential neighborhood and we're converting it back to residential use. We're not adding any additional volume aside from the small little addition on the rear of the alley for trash. Currently, the trash bins are strewn in the alley. If you walk down that alley, they're just out in the right of way. So that little enclosure that we're adding, and Adam kind of pointed to this already, that it'll enclose the trash. We actually already met we met with DAPR, kind of a preliminary review, and they did have most of the comments that we received from DAPR were for what's going with the trash, it's what's happening with the trash, and what about the dumpsters. So we tried to address that as best as we could. Again, it is an adaptive reuse. It's going into a residential use, so there, we do have to accommodate trash a little bit differently than the original building was treated but for the most part, the volume of the building is not changing. The building, if we're looking at the historic nature of this building, the facades, the landmark status, we believe that the elevation, the primary elevation, the north elevation, the west elevation, which is the front entry, and the south, which are the two primary elevations for the building, we are doing a very light touch on the exterior, primarily window replacement, and there are a few windows that we're adding on the south elevation, but what we're doing is, as Adam pointed out, is that we're replacing an existing square relief in the stone with a square window that'll fit perfectly in that opening. So we believe that in the end, you won't even notice that any of the work was done because it'll fit the architectural character and design of the original building. Granted, instead of that stone relief, there will be an opening. Now, to your point, could we have used fewer units? We've put in as many units as we could in the building without changing the volume. So right now, we have extremely tall ceilings, which lend itself, just like the exterior of the building has a very extremely unique and historic character, the interior as well. So those large volume spaces, the idea was that we incorporated narrow, primarily studio, one-bedroom and two-bedroom units. We've kind of dispersed the unit sizes appropriate for the market demands. And we put in mezzanine levels. So, again, I know we're just talking about the exterior, but as we talk about the interior, with those tall ceilings, it gave us an opportunity where you walk into this small unit and there'll be an interior staircase that'll bring you up to a mezzanine level. Taking advantage of that volume space, there'll be a little bit of a balcony with a guardrail kind of overlooking this huge volume space with these windows. There'll be very dramatic apartment units. I mean, we think that it'll be a very desirable building to live in. It's very unique. You don't have that character anywhere else. So we did take the volume of the building and we sectioned it appropriately for the number of units that would fit. We could put in fewer units, but there would be bigger units. And we wouldn't be changing anything on the exterior. Nothing would be changing. So right now, financially, it worked out the best, and most appropriately, the market demands for smaller units, one-bedroom units in this neighborhood. It's primarily commuter district, an area. There's another issue with, with parking, but again, access to public transportation is readily available. And again, the smaller units are more appropriate for the neighborhood. And again, we're not adding on to the building, we're using what's there. So hopefully that addressed that question.
No, I think it does. The only other point I'll just make is that they're also requesting a parking variation, and obviously, there's no opportunities on site to provide parking, which is not unusual for a historic building.
Correct.
So you're leasing the spaces off-site, and then obviously, leasing spaces is, relatively cost prohibitive, so I think that plays into your decision to reduce that parking while also meeting the market demand you expect for the units.
Correct. Yeah, the owners are requiring a relief to the parking requirement, but we believe that because we are within, and clearly stated in the zoning ordinance that relief can be applied for within a certain criteria, and I believe we're asking for, I believe it was a 50% reduction, if I'm not mistaken, because we are within 1,000 feet of public transportation. So it's a very walkable neighborhood. It's a bike-friendly neighborhood. It's downtown Evanston. And again, all of that fits in, we believe, perfectly with the intent of the code, with the zoning ordinance, with the relief that, has been historically granted for projects like this.
So,
I
go
was
ahead.
going to add one more element to the unit size conversation about how, the density is a function of the lot size, right? Well, we've got a building that doesn't conform to any of the setbacks. It's larger than a building would have been allowed to be on the site. It's not taller, but it's wider. And so, like Mike was saying, we had stuck with the original, allowable density, we would have these huge units, almost, really difficult to lease, and expensive. So that's the last bit I wanted to add.
Yeah, I think all three primary elevations that are seen from the right of way, and Kate, to your point, understand that the north side, it's a zero lot line condition neighboring to an adjacent property. But again, a very light touch on the primary facade. For the most part, we're replacing windows and putting in a lift, making the building fully, accessible, which it should be. The building should be accessible. So that to us was like a first thing that we need to do. We need to figure out how to make it accessible. So the lift on the front, and again, it's something that it's off to the side. I believe we came up with a solution that is as sensitive and least impactful to the building. So again, you have these grand stairs on the front of the building, this colonnade, and just kind of off to the side, you have this small little object. It's a wheelchair lift. We think that's important, obviously, to include that to the building to make it accessible. The south elevation, again, primarily window replacement. And then on the alley side, again, not a primary right of way, but again, how are we dealing with the trash? And the fact that we are reducing, right now, there are condensers that are kind of up on a pad. We're taking those condensers. I mean, it's a blight when you look in the alley and you've got these big condensers in the alley right next to these dumpsters, and it just, you look at it and it's horrible. We're taking those condensers, putting them up on the roof in as a non-visible location as you possibly can. We're putting it kind of up on the corner. There'll be a mechanical platform. You'll access it from one of the staircases. So the mechanical equipment, we tried to address it as best as we could to take that out of sight. And then the trash enclosure, again, we did include a small trash enclosure with a door, which again is a tremendous improvement to the condition that's there.
I have a question. If we could go to the slide, it would be page 159. It shows, so I am familiar with this building. And the north elevation is actually quite visible from this public way. So the fact that it keeps getting glossed over gives me concern, because you can see it quite visibly across the parking lot of the adjacent building. And it is just a very solid wall right now. And then if we go to the elevations on 102, page 102, you are making a very drastic change to that the spacing and the rhythm and the proportion of these openings is very different to the proportion of the openings of the historic facades, as well as you're being so sensitive on the other facades, and you're being very careful. And then this facade, it just seems like it's just a very large number of openings, and it just doesn't feel compatible with the sensitivity on the other facades. And I realize that, you know, you have to have light and vent. I completely understand that. I appreciate that you're making it into a residential building and that you've been very sensitive on the other facades. I think one of my major concerns just is that the number of openings here is just quite abundant, and it just doesn't seem to be compatible with the other facades. So that would be one of my concerns.
No, I mean, I was going to go back to this. To me, this kind of looks like almost a doodle rather than, I mean, on the other facades, if you show this example of actual windows that we installed, I don't think this is at all sufficient for us to really know what we're going to do with this.
Well, and some of these are terraces, right? They're
Correct.
even,
Correct.
so they're just openings.
Correct, because we were up on the zero lot line.
Of course.
So the windows themselves are fixed, so they're fire-rated glass. And the openings that have the little X in them are actually recessed balconies for the units. So the actual door, and if we can, flip to one of the upper, you can go to the plan.
Is there a rendering? I know you have your model that shows the front elevations. Is there, it doesn't look like there's a rendered view of the north.
Yeah, we don't have a perspective of that, again, because there is an apartment building nearby, and I
But
I
it
get
doesn't
that it's-
block that
I get it
elevation
it's
at
set-
all.
I get that it's set back. I mean, it partially blocks it, probably, I'd say about half.
I mean, not very much. You can see it right in there. So when you keep saying that it's not visible and it's not visible, I mean, I completely disagree on that statement. You very much see it when you walk down the street. So I agree with Commissioner Simon. Like, we would need to see more information on that facade. It can't just be discarded as it's on the lot line, it's right up against another building, because it's really not that type of condition in this situation.
You know,
Right, okay.
can I comment on the elevations? You know, the building's a classical building. Interestingly enough, it's a classical building on only 2 of its 4 sides, maybe 3 if you squint at the alley facade. The side of the building was just a brick wall, and there are umpteen 3 flats and 6 flats in Chicago where you get a classicized or a decorated stone facade. You turn the corner and the building and the architecture just devolve into common brick walls. I am not as disturbed. You know, the job of trying to fenestrate those apartments to carefully fit the windows into the classical panelization of the south facade, you know, sort of backs you into a corner in terms of what the windows in the units will be. Obviously, the north side gives you, if you take this attitude, much more flexibility. Jokingly, we used to refer to that facade as the Walter Gropius facade. Nothing against Gropius's architecture, except stuff was supposed to be functional. You put the window where it needs to be and where it does the best job of lighting a room. So I don't have that same problem with the north facade. Could the proportions be different or better?
It should still be compatible, right?
What?
It should still be compatible. It's visible. So it can't just be anything. It should be compatible with the building.
Well, it's a brick wall now that has nothing to do with the stone.
But they're
classical
proposing
facades.
openings, so shouldn't those proposed openings and the proportions of those openings and the number of those openings be compatible with the other rest of the facades?
I have a comment on that as well. I don't know if I am bothered or not, because I don't feel as though it's rendered as well as the other facades of the building, and I feel like it was glossed over that way on purpose, because we keep saying, oh, you can't see it. But when I was initially going through the package, looking, you've got the corner views that show each corner of the building without making that turn around the corner. And to me, that's like, oh, I don't want to show you what we're really what's going on there. So I think we need to see details, and we need to see this at the same level as the other sides in order to make have an opinion.
Yeah, I think it's worth complimenting you guys. I think that the insertion of windows into the classical order, particularly of the south side, while it makes some pretty miserable lighting conditions on mezzanines and some of the apartments, and I totally don't understand what actually happens in terms of windows on the third floor, you've actually resisted the desire to start punching more windows into that south facade in deference to the compositional quality of the building. So you should be complimented on that. If I don't know, do people want to make more comments about windows? Or because I would move on to the only element that I think for me is problematical with respect to the standards, because I think you basically meet the standards. I have mixed feelings about that, but I think you actually do meet them. I am disturbed. Well, I'm disturbed by the handicap access. I understand that it's a little glass box and it's weather enclosed, but I think that, if you moved it around the corner, which would require yet another zoning variation, put it on that north facade, maybe actually made a canopy to signal that it was there, and then had it go up and open through a door into the landing of the stair, which then opens to the lobby through double doors, that would not put you in the position of defacing the front of the facade, or the main facade and the entry facade, and its symmetrical stairs and composition, which is really one of the strong characteristics of the building. And I know you think that truncating the plinth on the side of the stairs and putting that thing there is a good solution, but I think that I would ask you to look for a better solution.
So leading from, not necessarily, just so I understand the comment, the lift where we have it, instead of leading off of the lift to the south to the upper platform, what you're suggesting is going into the building then?
No.
Into the stair?
No, not at all.
Sorry.
At the top of the slide, you have that stair.
Correct.
We're at an upper level, but on the ground level, there's a very large landing. And what I'm wondering is, could you still have that as a simple outboard structure, that the lift that you're planning on using, have it come up and then go, the same way as you're doing there, where you come in one side, you go out the other side without having to turn your wheelchair. You would just have a door that would swing into the stair, and then you've got double doors into the elevator landing. The only thing, I know the door swing can't encroach into the turn radius of the stair, but looks like there's plenty of room there, and that way you wouldn't have to modify the front of the building.
Well, the issue with the stair is the stair
Yeah,
goes
you
down.
need a zoning variation to do that.
It goes into the,
It's on the adjacent property. It's already on the
it's on the
Oh,
lot
then
line.
what's the lawn that's shown? Oh,
No, those are
That's the next building.
there's a green,
Yeah, we're on the,
you're right on the lot line.
we're on the lot line.
Okay,
Right.
yeah,
And-
my
and-
apologies.
And really,
Can't do it.
and going into that stair directly, again, the stair goes into the basement, and just, we're about 4.5 feet above grade right now, so it's a tremendous amount of height to kind of overcome. So the solution, and again, we did study this to locate it, again, because we are limited on facades. We did, I don't want to make it seem like we didn't think about the north facade, because we actually did think about it quite a bit, just the location of the openings, and ultimately, we held the main, what we considered the main facade, which is the front entry, which is the west facade and the south facade. Those are the primary facades of the building that we see the historical character. We treated those as sacred and tried to touch them minimally, again, primarily window replacement. And again, on the alley side, again, the amenity, the trash, again, we believe we addressed that as best we could to address the trash
No
issue,
problem with it,
including
yeah.
windows. That also, I guess, in our minds was somewhat questionable because it was in an alley, not necessarily a front facade. I do understand that there's no way that you can't walk around the building and see the facade. So I agree that the north facade is visible from the adjacent lot. Again, we were looking primarily at Maple and just the primary right-of-way. The fenestrations on the north facade were dictated primarily by the floor plan. We did try to line them up as best as we could. To get some sort of a classical rhythm working with those, we'd probably have to lose the balconies. Just because right now, those units not having operable windows was a problem for us. So we introduced these balconies where somebody can actually kind of open up, walk out onto a balcony. Again, we're a zero lot line, so those balconies, that door is 5 feet back. So that way, we can kind of deal with the fire separation issues, the code required separation there. We can't just put a door or balcony. We can't put a Juliet balcony on a zero lot line, right? We have to be 5 feet back. So that was kind of the point of putting those balconies on that north side. Primarily, a lot of the light's going to be coming in from the south. We wanted to do something for the units on the north that they can enjoy some natural light in their unit. Again, they've got this huge volume space. It'll be a great space to be in. How do you deal with the natural light? On the upper levels, we put in skylights to try and bring in light. The upper level, the structure, again, I know we're talking about the interior, primarily talking about the exterior for this presentation, but the interior, there are these existing steel trusses. I mean, they're just beautiful. It's going to be, that upper level, we're going to remove the ceiling. Those trusses are going to be exposed. It's going to be a very, very unique space, very unique experience. We just wanted to bring in some natural light to those north side units. And again, of all the, of the 4 elevations, that north facade was the facade that, again, didn't have any classical detailing. It's a big blank brick wall currently. But again, we did go through trying to line the windows up. But again, it had to work with the apartment units that are up there. They are very narrow units. And obviously the additional complexity of having these balconies, which we think is a big, it's a big plus for those units to be able to, if you can't open the window, at least you have a balcony and you can open that up and get some natural ventilation and some light.
I have some comments just about the elevator.
There are 2 people who want to testify.
I was wondering if you guys had considered putting a ramp somewhere, so I am not a wheelchair user, but I do have 3 kids. I use strollers all the time, so I'm similarly looking for accessible ways to get into buildings all the time. I have a 3-year-old special needs kid, so I'm always looking for stroller access. I just was wondering if you had thought about ramps, like specifically maybe on the south side where you do have some setback, if you could go to the basement even, because I know those elevators aren't that, for stroller users, because you have some 2-bedroom units, they're not that great. And you mentioned keeping it open with no roof, which I think about the winter here and all kind of problems you might have with that elevator. I just wanted to hear your thoughts on, if you thought about a ramp.
So we did consider a ramp. We looked at that. The ground, the first floor is up about 4'7". So we would need a ramp that's about 54 feet long, and that doesn't include turnaround, right? You can't just have a 54-foot long ramp.
But a ramp to the basement, had you looked at that too? Because I've been places you go into the basement and then you hit the elevator and then you go up.
We'd literally have to dig out that whole side yard in order to get a ramp to go down. Because again, we're 4.5 feet up, but we're gonna another 8 feet down, so the ramp would be even longer. So
yeah, I know you are
actually
digging out to put some window wells already. I know it would require reconfiguring, but that would get the elevator off of the main entry, I guess that's the west facade. That would sort of solve that issue, I think, of getting it off there.
Yeah. Well, we looked at a number of things with the basement. We actually at one point tried to get parking in the basement as well, trying to figure, to get a ramp coming in off the alley, and there's no way to turn around. Again, just being that far down, it would have required tremendous excavation on the south elevation of the building that would definitely be visible and noticeable. So we Again, this solution was the least intrusive to the facade, and it gave us the functionality of being able to get up. And again, as far as, you brought up the point that, in the winter and you have the lift and what happens with the snow. Well, if you have, an 80-foot long ramp going into the basement, again, that's going to require snow removal also. And that's below
Sure,
grade.
but there's no
and
mechanicals
there's
to a ramp. There's no mechanicals to a ramp that could be damaged by
Right.
the sort of the inclement weather.
Right, understood. Well, again, these lifts are made to be outside. There's an annual maintenance program, and these things are maintained and kept up, just like an elevator is in the building, right? I mean, there's an elevator in the building, and those, elevators are maintained, inspected, and again, this exterior lift is likewise. I mean, ideally, the building would be at grade, but again, we're trying to address a condition that we have here, where we're 4.5 feet up, and how do we get somebody from grade up to the building without, major excavation and underpinning the entire building. And again,
Or
it
alternately,
would be a very long ramp to
yeah,
get
Commissioner
you
Cohen
up
had
or down.
mentioned, the elevator. I mean, it could be, you do have a setback on the south side where you could potentially move the elevator, I think, to the other side instead of the side he was recommending, because you don't have a setback. I mean, that's just a thought, too.
Right.
To get it off the front.
We did look at it on the south, but again, we thought that it would be more, again, then it would be something that would be visible from two historic facades, not just from the front elevation. We looked at we actually looked at putting a full elevator on the back, but we didn't think it was appropriate to expect somebody that was handicapped to go through an alley to get into their building. So we said, we
Yeah,
thought,
I
okay,
agree.
we should, if you're entering your building, you should go in through the front door just like anybody else. So we took that as a priority. So going into the basement, I mean, if you live on a third floor, I don't know if it's the appropriate thing to say, okay, if you're in a wheelchair, you got to go in through the basement. So, we looked at the solutions, we looked at the options, and we believe that, putting in a lift is not ideal, but for the condition that we have, we thought, going in through the front door was the best solution, and it had the least impact on the historical significance of the building.
Are there any other, Commissioner Simon, you had a question? You sure? Are there any other questions by commissioners?
I just had another question. This is sort of the zoning related, but I know you're limited, because we have to weigh in on that. You're limiting the parking spaces. I thought you had a bike room in here. Do you have a bike room or no?
Yes.
You do have a bike room.
Yes.
Is it in the basement level? Is that?
Yeah,
is
it's.
Is it in the drawings here? Or did I
It's
miss
not,
it?
it'll be in the basement. That was something that we had actually discussed at the DAPR meeting, to provide
Okay.
bike room in the basement
see.
near one of the amenities.
Okay, so it's not,
so-
it's not in here though?
It's
at the
it's not
moment.
currently on the
I
plan.
see, okay,
But our owners are committed to it, so.
okay.
If there are no other questions by commissioners, then I would like to ask the applicant to please sit down, and then we will call for public comment.
Jack or Len, whichever wants to go first. And then if you would just state your name and your address, please.
Sure. My name is Len Karofsky of 822 Monroe Street in Evanston. Thank you for the opportunity to offer comments. My name is Len Karofsky, an architect in preservation and adaptive reuse. I'll start off by complimenting and thanking staff for the report. Well done, Cade. And Carlos. The report, I think it accurately describes the significant conditions of the building. The Masonic Temple is one of Evanston's most intact and significant institutional resources. And I think from my perspective, the temple is important structurally to Evanston, both for its link to the cultural past and the history of Evanston, and the architectural significance of its intact 1926 Holabart and Roche classical exterior and interior design. I understand that John Evans was one of the founding members of this temple, as was William Holabart, the architect, was also a member. I think the entrance to the first floor Ionic Hall is actually named after the architect. Architecturally, it's rare to see two magnificent spaces in the Ionic and Corinthian halls with their original
along with the original paint, carpeting, draperies, lighting, wood finish, and detailing, along with Zubair wall coverings and other portions of the space. But going to the specifics on this, I think I, like Commissioner Stewart, would compliment the architects on their facade modifications with the addition of windows. It's unfortunate, but it's an understandable proposed change in use. The proposed design, as was indicated by the Commissioner's discussion, does fit within the classical architecture and the panelization. The ADA front entrance, I would also agree with the Commissioner's assessments hidden here. I think this item should be tabled, and there should be some additional study brought back to this committee. I do appreciate Commissioner Cohen's option to bring it in from the entrance, from the side, bringing it to the stair entrance platform. I recognize that's over the property line. Maybe it's a zoning variation. I think it would provide a cleaner entrance. I think the commission should also see what the option looks like, bringing in that handicap elevator, as was suggested by one of the commissioners, with regard to bringing it up to what was currently the cloakroom in the side of the building. The third option is in the current proposed option. I think the biggest problem I have with it is knocking down the plinths facing the side of the handicap lift with it. And Kate, I was wondering if you could flip to the blow-up plan, please. You know, the blow-up plan of the ADA lift. Plan, please. I would ask the architects to please go back and recheck your plan. I actually think your drawing is inaccurate. You're showing the first step. I think it's roughly 2'0" from the base of the front entrance facade. That number is greater, I believe. The first step doesn't start till, I think, 45, 46 inches. So I think you've got more room to work with than what's indicated in that plan. So again, respectfully, I think you're showing about a little less than 3 feet. I think you've got about 45 or 46 inches, if you could verify the accuracy of your drawing. I'm saying it's wrong. You got 46 inches from the face, from the bullnose base of the facade coming down to that nose of the top stair. So I think what that will allow you to do, again, Kate, if you can hold it back on the blow-up plan.
Yeah, I actually suggested to Cade that he go to the whole first floor plan and enlarge that same area, because as you point out, there's a space adjacent to that a lift could potentially go in, so that you would enter from the north side through a door.
I think Commissioner Cohen's
Yep.
example is there is one option coming in this direction. If you can scoop down the plan, there is another option. I'm not sure how viable it is, what the visual impact is, but I think it's something worth looking at, of bringing in people from this option. It does have an architectural impact. The third option is, just a correction of what's happening up in here, and then maybe that's the flow.
Yeah, if on the north, to come on the south side means adding an exterior door to an already balanced composition. Coming in on the north side would just involve putting a lintel in what looks like it's a bearing wall at the end of the stair, with probably, I don't know. I need to see the whole first floor plan. But it looks like that area could be reworked so that you opened a door on the north side, rolled in on a lift, came up to the main level, and then, came out and somehow got into the, that end. Well, that's the second floor, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, we need the first floor. Wait. there. Great, so what is that? I can't see it. The little room the other side of the mason, what's a heavy pochette wall? Probably masonry. Is that cloakroom?
On the south of the
No, what is it on the north side?
I think they're looking at solutions to
I would make sure, I would urge commissioners not to do the design for the
Okay.
architects. So I think they're aware of the concerns. If we could just reference the standards and reference the concerns, that would be preferred.
In conclusion, to sort of move on to the conclusion here, I think the proposed alterations with some additional study, particularly on that ADA ramp, should be considered reasonable. Then there are 3 zoning variances that are requested by the city. A question to be asked either at this commission level or the land use commission is, to what public benefit to the city is there in granting these requests, given what, on a broader perspective, is a loss of both cultural and historical architectural building integrity? You know, I don't think we've seen slides of the existing conditions, but the Ionic Room, the Corinthian Room are magnificent spaces, intact 100 years after, almost 100 years after their construction. So the public benefit might be either a use or user more compatible, or a residential plan, perhaps that, as it was suggested, of lower density, that might have a greater sympathy to the building. So again, it might be a consideration for this committee or the Land Use Commission that there be something done internally to have greater sympathy, to show a public benefit of retaining what is a great history of Evanston in the Masons and maintaining a great architectural legacy of Hola Barton Rouge.
Thank you, Mr. Horowski.
Jack?
Hello, Jack Weiss, former Preservation Commissioner and board member of Design Evanston. 400 Main Street, by the way. It's frustrating to accept that the Commission's purview is limited exclusively to exterior issues. While I feel this project meets exterior problems reasonably well, I'm much more concerned about the proposed impact the project has on the important interior spaces of the building. The staff report states the Masonic Temple is one of Evanston's most intact and significant institutional resources, being the work of a nationally and internationally renowned architect and master builder. 2, the structure is in excellent condition and retains excellent exterior and interior architectural integrity. 3, the interior includes what might be the original paint, carpeting, draperies, lighting, wood finishes and detailing, and Zuffer wallpaper. The first applicable standard for zoning relief states, the request is necessary and/or appropriate in the interest of historic conservation so as not to adversely affect the historical architecture or aesthetic integrity of the landmark or character of the local historic district. The proposed project leaves little, if any, of the aesthetic integrity of the interior spaces intact, but we can't discuss interior spaces here. One of the applicable standards for review for certificate of appropriateness deals with alteration. Every reasonable effort should be made to adapt the property, structure, site, or object in a manner that requires minimal alteration of the property, structure, site, or object, and its environment. It goes without saying that the minimal alteration of the Masonic Temple's interior spaces is non-existent, but we can't discuss interiors here. One way the applicant can seek a favorable review of its request for 3 major zoning variations is to offer major public benefit. That benefit would be a reduction in the number of dwelling units requested so that both the aesthetic integrity and minimal alterations of the interior spaces is enthusiastically embraced and the historical context of the building's original use be retained. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll open it up to commissioner discussion.
I do want to just point out one item. When we were originally approached by our client R2, looking at the Masonic Temple, one of the studies we did look at was to keep the building as an event space. So we came up with a series of floor plans, and they did their own homework and research, market studies to see to use this as an event space, and it didn't work out for them. So here we have an existing building. It's a historic structure, and it's sad that it's standing vacant. But again, this repurposing, adaptive reuse. Again, it's in an R6 district. Repurposing it as a residential building, we think it is appropriate for the location of where it's at. So.
Thank you. Commissioners, yes, Len, can you step up to the podium, please?
I appreciate your assessment on that. I do know and had given pro bono time, quite frankly. That's why I know the facility as well as I do. There was a previous Evanston-based developer who was proposing this as an event center. His due diligence, unfortunately, had been cut off, and the sale proceeded with the existing proposing owners here. So, I'm not sure, of the concept of market studies of it. Maybe it's a water over the dam, maybe it's unfortunate, but it would have been nice to maintain it as you were suggesting, the event center that it could have been. I think that's kind of my retort, that it's sort of unfortunate, but there were people looking at that.
Thank you.
So I do appreciate the public comment that this is an architecturally and historically significant property and building in Evanston. It is National Register eligible, which means that if it was on the National Register, you could use historic tax credits for the project, and that would take into the public comments what the significant interior spaces, and then that could also potentially give some more financial incentive to potentially reduce the number of units, and so.
I think the dilemma, the rock and the hard place, is that while adaptive reuse may be the only way to save many historic buildings, buildings of assembly are, because of the way they're structured, are historically very difficult to repurpose for an entirely different use. I feel like this project is sort of like, we know the building is potentially threatened with demolition, so it's like the neurosurgeon who removes the brain tumor, saves the patient's life, and leaves them mentally impaired for the rest of their lives. I shouldn't say that, but I did. So I'm mentally impaired. I have no mechanism that keeps me from saying exactly what I think about things. I did spend a lot of time looking at this project because, like everybody else, I was taken with the fact that the windows are put in really almost perfect places in terms of the arrangement on the classical facade. So I wanted to see what that meant in terms of the plan or the plans. And I have to say that for housing, the south-facing units are severely, in some cases, under-fenestrated. The units are tiny. I did both low-income public housing and Section 8 housing in the 1870s. Sorry, I'm not that old yet, but I may appear to be. In the 1970s and 1980s. And these units are so tiny that they do not meet what was the government's minimum standards for low-income subsidized housing. You know, I did look at them and say, wow, I haven't seen units in American buildings that have double-story living rooms and are duplexed. And the reason that you don't see them, for everybody that's not an architect here, is because our codes require second means of egress from the second floor bedrooms, except when they're considered a mezzanine, which means that they're less than a certain percentage of the floor area below. And magically, there is no second floor hallway. There are no second means of egress, which I think is a genuinely bad idea in a fire. And the units are so small that the mezzanines, that the second floors qualify in, at least in every case as I could tell, as mezzanines and don't actually require that. So, you know, you may have done a market analysis of these apartments, but, you know, particularly the basement apartments, I can't imagine the appeal of these units. Having said that, I'm going to tell you exactly how I'm going to vote, because I think you guys deserve a certificate of appropriateness, and I will vote yes. I will vote no about recommending the zoning variation. I have nothing against the bustle on the trash bustle on the back, but I think that the number of units that is being crammed into this poor, you know, building leaves you. I think it's too many units.
I will say, if commissioners, with Stuart Cohen's comments, our recommendations for zoning have to be related to an exterior element. That we cannot make a statement about
Really?
the interior units. And
One of the things they're asking for
Chair Brian Holt.
is an increase in the number of units.
So can I potentially give us a
Let me just
standard
double check
to-
with Cade that is
Oh,
accurate.
interesting. Cade.
I mean, the commission's powers are limited by design, and they're limited to exterior alterations and construction visible from the public way. And so in the same lens, a recommendation to the Land Use Commission should, I think, similarly fall within those limited powers. I think that it would be up to the Land Use Commission, who has more of a broad purview, to look more in depth at the size of the units, the number of units. I think that they would be the proper body to make that determination. I think that you as a commission could say that you think it meets the standards that you have to meet, these three standards. That yes, through our lens as a commission, looking at the exterior of the building, we would give a positive recommendation. However, I think you would also be able to say that you would encourage them to take a closer look at the body that is charged with that, to take a closer look at it. So I think you're limited in your powers and the standards that you need to review and meet, but you can make non-binding recommendations as well if you'd like, I think. But you should not use the interior spaces or the number of units to make your determination whether the standards for variation recommendation are met or are not met.
Cade,
I think we've talked about this issue in the past, and the zoning modifications have at most peripherally related to preservation. If you could say they're really not. And I think in the past we talked about maybe not wanting to go on the record of approving something, but really to pass a motion saying that we don't. I mean, the wording we can talk about, but that we don't believe that the zoning issue involves any preservation issues, and so we defer to the commission. I mean, that would then mean we're not, having Stuart.
Yeah, and
to endorse.
Yeah.
In the section states that the commission has the ability to make a recommendation. It doesn't say that they have to provide one.
Yeah. So we could just decline to make a recommendation on the basis that the zoning variations aren't related to the preservation issues concerning the property, something like that.
Well, the only one that is the setback on the east side of the building for the trash bustle.
I mean, I disagree. I think the number of units also governs how many window openings are made on the north elevation.
So may I just direct us to standard number 2 on an alteration that says the distinguishing original qualities or character of a property shall not be destroyed. I mean, I do understand that, I mean, inherently, changing uses, you're going to, there is an opportunity, those wreaths on the southern facade are going to be removed, and that, I mean, the larger quantity of units lends itself to, that removal, I guess, right? I mean, so.
If you want to have any apartments on that
Yeah.
level, you'd have to,
Right.
you can't not have windows.
Yeah, I feel like the south, I do agree that the south and the west are done very surgically and very,
Yeah, and
they have to have a window.
Right.
yeah,
so-
but I would also point out that the wreaths are contained within a panel,
Yeah.
and that the choice of a wreath, I don't know if, maybe Len can tell us whether that symbolically somehow relates to Masonic imagery, in which case you could argue they shouldn't be removed. I don't think it does. So, if in fact those were Masonic symbols in those panels, I would feel differently. But the wreaths are a kind of general purpose classical piece of ornament, and I think the solution of replacing each panel with a window is actually a good one.
I mean, I guess I would like to see us, I mean, we'll see if, other people agree with this, but on the zoning issue, I would like to, basically state that we're not approving or disapproving because we don't feel it has a material preservation elements. And, therefore, that way we're not going on record as approving the density, for example, which many of us may have mostly non-preservation issues with. I do think that, I'm with Jamie that it's hard to vote on without a much better rendering of the north facade. I mean, it may be that when we see that, understandably, they're going to need to put windows in the north facade, and we understand that it's going to be dictated by requirements that may not just be what the north facade looks like. But I think we need to see it. We may have suggestions or comments on it. What are the windows going to be? It's just, the drawing was just not give them, just didn't give us sufficient information. It wasn't a very close case. So I think, again, I would certainly like to, I think it's great that somebody is going to reuse this building. And I think to, leave it vacant, have it potentially someday be demolished would be a real mistake and a sad thing to do. And I think, Evanston has a lot of big new apartment buildings that are up and that people want to build that aren't very attractive. And I think to have apartments in this historic building would just be wonderful. But again, I'd like to see the full project before voting to approve it.
Well, I think the only kind of counterpoint to what you said, Mark, is I think the commission should consider whether the variations that are requested are necessary in order for it to be adaptively reused, understanding that adaptive use is a central tenet of preservation and historic conservation. If they weren't to be preserved, could the adaptive use not occur? That would be the only counterpoint.
How can we assess the viability? We have no ability to assess the economic viability of a certain number of units versus others.
Yeah, but
And,
you
that's a
suspect
financial-
that's why they're asking for 24, is that somebody wants to walk away with a profit rather than doing a good deed for the city of Evanston.
Well, it's also
Sorry
it's
again
also
for
the city's
unfiltered
inclusionary
comments.
housing ordinance that is a contributor to the number of units, because if you go through the whole math, they get all these extra units if they provide so many affordable units, and so that's how you get from 14 to 24.
I believe it's actually 30.
Or 30, sorry.
Yeah, it's a little complicated in that the bonus units that they get for providing the 3 on-site affordable housing units, they get 2 additional units for each one, so that's plus 6. Those 6 units don't count towards the density of the building as an incentive for them to provide those units on-site. So yes, they're proposing 30 units, but only 24 count towards the density. It's a very kind of strange section in the code, but that's how
Yeah,
it's
but that's
interpreted.
in a situation
the 6
where
units just kind of
14
don't
are
exist.
allowed.
I just want to follow up with what Commissioner Cohen had said regarding the symbolism. I just did a quick Google search, and I don't know if anyone else did. Looks like the laurel or the wreath is important in the Masonic, to the Masonic. So just if that meant anything to anyone or informs your thought process, there was a intention behind that symbolism, I think.
Take them down, put them in the lobby.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could also request that they just get documented properly for historic records purposes. So it wouldn't be the first time we've had to use.
Hi. With the situation of the wreaths, the reliefs, is there any opportunity to kind of study if they can be removed without destroying them and maybe put in part of the lobby or something that people would see the actual object?
Yeah, we did actually discuss that to relocate them, put them somewhere we thought it didn't seem appropriate to put them in the alley because it would be kind of dressing up the backside of the building a little bit, but if that's a requirement or if that's something, I mean, we did actually look at the windows, with those windows, potentially putting some sort of a pattern, a custom pattern to kind of, I guess, have some reference to the wreaths that used to be there, because you can do custom mullion patterns on windows. Ultimately, we drew that up and we saw that with the windows the existing windows below that we were replacing and matching, we thought that the building, it looked a little bit more appropriate to just use that same vocabulary of the windows that are going to stay rather than kind of bring a reference to wreaths that used to be there that, again, if you're looking at the building for the first time, you'd never know, that's because the wreaths used to be there. So the intent was that we were matching the windows that were aligning directly below. Just from an elevation standpoint, it looked more appropriate. Regarding saving that, I would imagine that it's possible to save masonry, to carefully saw cut that out. We did talk about, if there's a way to save that. It's definitely something that, we would be open to doing, just finding a location for that, just, putting it inside the building. How that is implemented, it's something we could study. It's something we did talk about. I mean, we are sensitive to these issues. We are architects also. Obviously we're trying to do the best we can obviously within the program requirements and maintaining, the exterior of the building, but also making it a functional building and having a purpose for the building. So I understand all the comments that were made here for the, but, and again, with the wreaths in particular, we did have many conversations about that and how we implement that. But the solution that we have right now with the windows, we thought looked most appropriate when we were looking at the elevations.
Yeah, I don't think it's an issue. The window itself is more, what do you do with relief? I have another, I don't know, I looked at the plan, and I know we don't have purview, but I was looking at the south elevation and how those windows that are represented in each floor, if you draw a line towards the other side, there's some opportunities to keep maybe the same opening size without necessarily changing the plan in some instances, or maybe sharing a window between two units. I think maybe it'd be worth your time to take a look whether or not you can reflect a little bit more the rhythm of the windows on the other side. I don't know if there's an opportunity to provide the balconies in a maybe slightly different location so you can actually, reflect what's happening on the other side. Because it's right now, I know it's a tertiary elevation, it's the one that it doesn't have the cladding of the stone, all that stuff, but you're still adding new fenestration that it would be, at least in my opinion, a good exercise to see whether or not the proportions of those openings can be a little more compatible with the rest of the elevations.
Can I make a comment? On the other side, when you infill the panels with the double casement windows, that is, if I remember the plans correctly, that's actually a living room space. On the north facade, which Kate had and now is gone, I'm wondering whether you could actually identify the living room spaces by repeating that double casement window rather than having all of these be singles.
So I would just,
Don't you hate having to deal with architects who want to redesign your project for you?
I guess I would reiterate about this zero lot line condition is that you couldn't have an operable window. It needs to be fire.
They're called muttons. It's just got a central division.
Sorry.
Yeah.
You used the word casement. I thought you meant literally. So you mean like you just mean like a configuratively.
A bigger window with a division down
sure.
the center, so it
Understood.
recalls the proportion and the character of what you're doing on the other side.
Definitely don't disagree with that. Just wanted to point out that it couldn't be operable unless you step.
Yes.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, that's another purpose. It's just more like how much of the original proportions of the openings could be reflected on the other side. And we understand this is not the most significant elevation at this point, but it doesn't necessarily mean that couldn't be improved if possible, because maybe not be possible.
Well, I would point out, though, again, we've done many studies on this facade, and again, the balconies, the priority to have operable, functioning balconies, because again, you can't just put a balcony. It's got to meet ADA. It's got to be certain. You got to have wheelchair turning rate. It's got to be 5 feet deep. It's got so again, it's not as simple as just getting to all line up, because again, we are trying to get a lot to work in a relatively small space and a big blank wall that's, and there's nothing typical about the structure of this building. Everything is concrete, everything is masonry. So I know that there was a comment that, trying to squeeze as many units as we can to make a profit. We're just trying to make the project feasible, quite frankly, because again, there's nothing simple about this structure. We actually had the building 3D scanned. We had a company come in at considerable expense. They actually had a laser scan. They scanned the entire interior and exterior of the building, and we brought it into our model. So it is a pretty accurate representation of the building. And again, we did that because we wanted to see what we can preserve, what we can keep. And it's, the structure, again, it's definitely a challenge to just make this feasible. So it's not like we're trying to, I don't get the perception from our client that they're just trying to make a quick buck here or just trying to make a profit. They're just trying to make this possible.
Just to go on record, I have no visual problems with your Ropius facade. I mean, the window groupings reflect the way in which you opposite hand the apartments, about a dividing wall, and visually the groupings of windows actually have centers, which is, I guess, ultimately a classical visual centers, which is ultimately a classical idea. So
Cade, you made a comment about on the zoning variances that we should make recommendation based on the preservation, and how do we deal with that when Commissioner Simon's comment about how do we can't make that financial basis? So how does that work, since the zoning variances are directly related to, as was just said, making the project viable? How do we reconcile that with preservation?
I think that you have two options. I think that you could either not make a recommendation, either because you don't have enough information or you don't think that it's has any impact on the exterior of the building, or I think you could ask for that information from the applicant.
We ask for the financial information?
To understand the finances of the project and why it's necessary.
Why 30 units is necessary?
can I make a suggestion about all of this? Because I would not want to set the precedent that Mark is suggesting, which is we, as a body, give up the right to comment on or recommend or not recommend zoning variations, but clearly off-site parking has nothing, it doesn't fall under any of the standards. So I think what we could do is to write a brief statement that's saying, if we vote to grant a certificate of appropriateness, that in granting the certificate of appropriateness, we are recommending the zoning variation for the rear yard setback for the trash storage area, but that the other zoning requests do not apply to the standards for certificate of appropriateness.
So that isn't these are two completely separate motions. The certificate of appropriateness is
I understand.
The first paragraph.
Yes.
The zoning, by issuing a certificate of appropriateness, has nothing to do with the zoning.
I know
we
that.
have to, as a separate matter, decide whether to issue a recommendation for or against or not.
So what I'm asking is, could you do it for the ones that we feel fall within our purview, and something like off-street parking, say we don't recommend or
Okay. Are there
not
any
recommended?
I mean, I guess my proposal was that there's not a material relationship between the exterior facades that we're responsible for and the zoning relief requested.
Yeah, and I
therefore
just
we should
argued
not
that the thing
make
that's stuck
a-
on the back falls within our
And
purview
I'm not
because
saying
it's an
there's
addition to
absolutely
a.
no relationship. I'm not saying there's absolutely no relationship, but at least to me, I would, the issues, the preservation issues are so minor or distant that are attenuated, that I would defer, I would not make a recommendation for or against, but I would defer to the greater expertise of the
Not make a
Land Use Commission, who is going to look at, has great expertise on zoning issues. I mean, this is a lot, the number of units is a constant that comes up that they're used to assessing, that they're equipped to make assessments about financial matters. And we just have no knowledge of that. And I mean, again, like Commissioner Reinhold said, you could ask for financial statements. I think it would be a big mistake for us to go down the road whatsoever. And I think we don't have to make any recommendation at all. We can decline to, and then separately deal with the certificate of appropriateness, which is a different motion and a different determination under the code.
Isn't the zoning, sorry, I think we table the zoning if we vote on a continuance, because I thought that was the direction people were going when they said it's hard with the limited information on the north facade to vote on the certificate of appropriateness. So I understand if we vote for continuance, we won't give zoning.
You would wait until.
Yeah, we would
the
wait
following
until the
meeting.
next one.
I also think, to Mark and Stewart's points that they were making, it says that the commission can make its recommendations to the appropriate body. It doesn't say that you have to make a recommendation in the affirmative or not. You don't have to say, yes, I think they should be approved. You could say, we didn't have enough information to assess the financial solvency of the project. One of your recommendations could be that the applicant provide that information to the appropriate body to make that judgment. It doesn't have to be that, yes, we want you to approve it, or no, we don't think so. You could say, we recommend additional information, or we recommend you look at various things.
But we've been asked to make a determination about the appropriateness of the changes to the outside of the building. While I would argue that those are not totally independent of the number of units, I would argue that the financial considerations that may dictate the number of units are not directly related to the visual decisions we're supposed to make, and therefore irrelevant. That's why I was suggesting that that we just deal with the one thing that falls within our purview, which is the thing on the alley. Alternately, the first thing I said is that I would vote against recommending the zoning because of my feeling about the number of units. Now, I don't know how your client would address that. I suspect that there's a pro forma that requires a certain number of units for this project to be profitable. and whether saying, you know, aesthetically, I feel there are too many units, you should reduce the number, whether that would be voting to kill the project, don't have enough information.
We're not required to approve or disapprove the
I
zoning.
understand, it's a
It says we
recommendation.
may, and so we don't have to have a motion that says, do we approve or disapprove the zoning? We're not required to do that. And if we feel it's, for the most part, not within our purview, we can defer to them rather than approving or disapproving.
I think that the issue of the number of units is within our purview because of the number of windows that are added to the building, not only on the north side, but then also at the basement levels on both sides, particularly on the south, and then the addition of the gate of the railing along that main facade. And so I think that it is related. If there were fewer numbers, they might not have to have as many windows at the basement or at the top, or excuse me, on the north.
Yeah, I would just say that you should pinpoint the appropriate standards that you have concerns with, the number of openings or the rhythm of solids to voids and the facades that you might take issue with. And that might be inherently, if you take issue with that, they might restudy what the internal floor plan looks like. But I don't think that it would be appropriate to say, we want you to reduce the number of windows in order to achieve that. Just say, we don't think that standard is met because the relationship of solids to voids or the proportion of those openings is not met. And then it's up to them to determine how to resolve that. And it may end up in a reduction in units, but it may not, if that makes sense.
I just want to go on record, since I'm the one that started with the issue of the north elevation. The clarification about the terraces and why you need them for the zero lot line and the fire separation, it makes a lot of sense. So, the idea of having the larger recessed openings, it makes much more sense now that you've clarified that to me, and I don't have as much of an issue with the idea of those punched openings being in that space, because it does provide a quality of living, on a tertiary facade. So I am less opposed to it than I was when it first started, just hearing your clarifications. And I do applaud you for being very careful about what you have been doing on the project and what you've been altering and what you haven't. So I just wanted to make sure I went on record, since I was obviously opposed to it in the beginning of this discussion.
Can I ask if you have much more architectural engineering perceptiveness than I do. Do you feel like the drawing is inadequate, just description of it?
My experience with buildings of this type, since it's my specialty, I think in my mind, I already know what those are going to look like. I don't know if that appeases all of the commissioners on sitting up here, but I think I can very easily visualize that and what those openings are going to look like and what the lintels will look like to make those openings and recess. Because as Commissioner Cohen said, I think we've all seen, a brick facade become this type of facade. I can get there. It would be nice to see more, but I'm not sure. I'm on the fence of whether that requires a continuance.
I just was going to say, I think this is obviously an important building, so I would like to see more personally. And I don't have the same background you do, so I can't necessarily visualize what that's going to look like. I also, the part that stood out to me was still the elevator in the front. And not just the elevator, but the railing. You can't see that as well in their rendering, but they do have a railing there too. It's glass, but the top is dark. I don't like it. It's throws the symmetry off to me when I see that beautiful symmetrical building. There's also a lantern on one side and then there's not on the other. I personally feel like that's standard one of the alterations. I think they could make a better adaptation. I'm not an architect, so again, that's your job, but I would like to see other, scenarios maybe, or attempts at getting it off the front of the building.
The thing that occurs to me again about the relationship of the units to the design is that if the number of units on the north side were reduced, you could actually do a plan where the balconies were bigger, that is, the recessed balconies that you can have operable windows and doors into would get bigger. They would do a better job of lighting the interior, but you would have to reduce the number of units along that one side by, I don't know, 1 unit for that side to actually have that, have your idea of the recessed balcony that has glass on its 3 interior sides, lighting, you know, a breakfast area, living room, and a bedroom, for instance. That's a brilliant solution, and it might, in fact, alleviate the whole issue of not being able, because of the fire separation and the fact that you're on the property line, not being able to have operable windows there. So, you know, I'd love to see that studied, but I don't know whether you can get your client to agree to that or whether that's even a possibility.
So I'd like to hear from the majority of the commission on, I mean, we're at a crossroads here now, whether we do a continuance and we ask for the accessibility ramp to be studied, and whether we ask for a little bit more information on the north and possibly alternative options to be studied. That would be one option, and we ask for a continuance and they come back for the November 8th meeting. The other would be that we obviously move forward with this proposal as stands. So this is an important building in Evanston, so I would really like to make sure everybody kind of gives their input on this and we make a.
So I would feel comfortable getting more information, especially to help us, but then I think moving forward to also help the land use and the city council moving forward, just have that more information would be helpful.
Before somebody makes a motion, is it possible to do a straw vote of those 2 options? No? Okay.
I have a.
If I could ask just
So I don't.
Carl, what information does
Well,
she mean?
well, like we asked for, you know, like Susie, you said you could visualize just from the drawing what it would be like, but I feel like it would be helpful just to have a drawing that could show how those lintels or the balconies, you know.
Or how the window divisions.
Yeah.
I would like to ask
The
the
lintel
applicant-
is invisible, except when you look up, you don't see it from the front because it's actually, because of the way it's set up into the double Y of brick and is supporting the outer band. Generally, people paint those out the same color as the brickwork, and it's not, if it's a steel lintel as opposed to a stone lintel, it's not ever thought of as a design element unless you've got a soldier course over the opening.
I just wanted to ask the applicant if how your feelings were on a continuance versus a vote for tonight.
Well, it's obviously not the outcome that we were hoping for, because, I mean, we've worked really hard to try and meet the standards and respect the elevations, the facades. I understand, and it's interesting to hear the deliberation and the thought process. And one of the concerns I have is that I know that there was some dislike to the north elevation, I guess, to put it that way. And then a rejustification like, well, we don't have enough information, so let's kick it back. So I don't feel that it seems like there is enough information on that elevation. To Stuart's point, it's a steel lintel. You're not going to see a big piece of limestone up there. I agree we don't have a rendering of that exterior of that facade because, again, we did take most of our care and attention to the historical facades, not kind of the blank wall. And I understand that you do see that from the inside property line. But as far as I don't know if we relocate, the other comment, relocating the lift that we have on the front facade, if we move it, on the opposite side, then you see it from the south. Again, we kind of have the same, somewhere we've got to locate this. We can't locate it further north. It's not a zoning issue. That's not even our property. So we can't move it on the other side of that property line. So if it's not on the front of the building, then it's going to be on the south side of the building, or it's going to be in the alley. Those are our three options. We found the spot that was least intrusive, gave the most access, gave the person that's using that lift respectable access. We didn't say go through the alley, go through the basement, go through the side door. We said, here's the front of the building. So we located that, we thought, in a very appropriate location. Obviously, having to respect the building is lot line to lot line. We don't have a lot of room to work with. We can't put in 50-foot long ramps. This solution seemed to be an appropriate way to deal with the facade. I know you're primarily supposed to be looking at the appearance of the facade, the historical nature of the facade. And I believe that the solution we came up with addresses a lot, all of those points. And, I understand that there's issues with, window fenestrations, number of units. But again, if I pulled out a demising wall from between each of the units, that doesn't necessarily mean I'm moving windows. So I know that you have issues with the number of units, and trying to, justifying that as to potentially changing, the way the windows look, again, we're focusing on the exterior. We believe that we did treat all the facades, all the elevations as appropriately as we could within the program. Within the character of the building, we're not altering the character of the building. Nobody's going to be driving down the street saying, what's going on. It's the Masonic temple still. Granted, it's not the interior, but again, we're here talking about the exterior of the building. So.
And I would just say for the commission, I think the two standards of concern for that elevation are construction 3 and 4, proportional openings, and the rhythm of solids to voids. I would say that what they've presented should be enough information to make that determination. I think if you just look at that elevation, I struggle to see how a rendering of that elevation would help you make that determination.
I don't think that elevation can change unless you change the floor plans behind it, and we don't have any ability to ask you to reconsider those, either by relaying them out somehow in a different configuration or by eliminating one of the units along that side. So, I think we should just vote on this.
I just wanted to say, I didn't, of course, I expect the applicant and the architect to say it's enough information, but only we can decide for ourselves whether we think it's the information we want to see. We did just vote on a continuance for the prior project, which honestly for me was a much less significant project to vote on, given it was in the back of the house, barely visible from the public way. Like, this is one that's really significant. Commercial property, many units, seen from many vantage points. I don't know why we would hesitate not to do a continuance in this case when we did it like on the last one. I just want to throw that out there.
I would just say that in the last, and I'm not trying to be argumentative, but in the last case, there was specific issue taken with the proportion of the openings compared to the rest of that rear elevation particularly. So you were asking specifically for revisions, not for more information from that applicant, where I don't necessarily think that there's at least consensus on the commission that revisions are necessary here. And I really struggle to see what additional information you would ask them to present that would make that determination.
For me, I'd said this, I would want to see the elevator moved or something different. I don't know if that's what other people think about that, but that's the thing that stood out to me the most, more than this side, actually. It was the front, because that's the one that's really, for me, the main facade that you see. That's the one that they're going to photograph everywhere in every book on architecture. That's the picture you're going to see.
I think they've adequately explained the difficulties in finding a location for the handicap lift. Literally, if it was inside and you had to enter it from the north side, you'd be entering it by going on to the adjacent property. So maybe one of the things that you guys could consider is building symmetrical wing walls off of the higher portion of the ramp that would actually shield those and might afford you an opportunity to incorporate the wreaths into them. I just don't want to see that lift as part of the grandeur of that entry stair. If there's some way you can figure out how to shield that from head-on and from the south, then that would kind of make me happy. But again, it costs you more money, and everybody here, I think, would want to see whatever you do done symmetrically as an extension of that platform.
Just a follow-up comment on the lift being where it is. It's creating your path of travel up onto the landing up there, and then through the original large wooden doors. Correct? Are we sure that those can be made accessible with accessible hardware and whatnot? And because it's such a distinctive feature, I don't want to lose those doors because they're on the path of travel. Have there been studies into the weight of the door, the swing of the door, what hardware can accommodate that to make sure that path of travel, and then also just your clear distances between your columns and the lip of the stairs and then the building, are clear enough? Just that. What do you look at for the path of the travel, especially with those doors?
Yeah, the way we've addressed issues like that in the past, if the doors are too heavy to open, we've kind of run across that also, especially on a windy day. The code is pretty vague it's pretty clear on opening force for doors on interior, on exterior. Again, on a windy day, it's going to be harder to open. Usually, the way that we address that would be through like ADA operator hardware, where you hit, push a button and it'll be an open and close. So that's something that would be, again, there's a closer on the door right now, so that would be something that we could potentially implement. The idea is, though, that we are going to keep those doors, refurbish them, because they are part of the character of the building. So, to address any kind of ADA issue, that I think that would probably be the only option there, to do something like that. We did look at the clear distances on the platform, so yeah, they are appropriate. There's a good amount of land. There's a good amount of area on top of that landing. I mean, it's a pretty grand staircase.
I think all you need is a turning radius, and ADA requires that you have a certain clearance on either side of the door so that you can approach with a wheelchair and actually operate whatever the hardware is. And I'm sure you've got push bar panic hardware on the inside. So I don't think we have to worry about these guys being on top of code issues.
No, I just want to make sure that those doors are going to work so that they can stay.
Yeah, obviously we'll address all the ADA concerns. I mean, that's the purpose of the lift is, that's the first hurdle to making the building accessible.
Yeah, I just don't want to have to then, deal with the lift where it is on the front facade, and then also potentially lose those amazing doors. That
right.
are,
Yeah.
So.
And again, we did look at. Honestly, if the recommendation is to find another spot for the lift, I'm open to hear suggestions because there's, again, it's either, like I said, it's either on the front, it's on the south elevation, or it's in the alley.
I thought Commissioner Cohen had a good thought by making the wing walls potentially, like as a thought, where it would hide a little bit, that would hide that, and you could use the freezes again. I mean, I'm not designing it for you, but I thought that was a good consideration for you.
Yeah, anytime you're going to build a little room, then it's got to be accessible, 5-foot turning radius. I mean, we're not talking about a little wing wall with, it's we're going to have to cut into the staircases.
No, you come in from one side and you go out the other side, so it's really on the west side that the wing wall would just screen the thing when it's in the lowered position.
Again,
again, I apologize. I taught a design studio for 27 years and actually got paid for making suggestions like this.
Right.
Okay, I think we need to find a resolution. We have a lot of other items to discuss tonight. So, again, we are back to the item of there are options on the table, which is to make a motion tonight with possibly a condition that they need to study the wing walls integrating the wreaths with an administrative review and possibly a subcommittee review, we continue it or we vote for it as is. So I would like to have the commission, let's make this choice now, and that way we can move on to other business.
Was that a motion?
No, I can't.
Why, you
So
can make
I think
motions,
that
can't
all
you?
of our comments have been thoroughly and thoughtfully addressed. So any issues that I have brought up have been resolved based on the commentary.
What about,
Since I was the one that made I'm comfortable with moving forward with the condition for the wing walls.
Commissioner Simon? Okay. So I think where we stand right now is the idea, and I'd like to ask the applicant if this is okay. If there is a study at least to potentially look into the wing walls to help conceal the ADA lift on the front facade, it would require an administrative review, so you would not need to come back to the commission, with potentially with a subcommittee of commissioners that could assist with that review.
Susie, to suggest wing walls is actually designs it for him. I think when Cade writes this up, it should be visual screening of the lift so that they can propose whatever
makes
they
sense.
feel.
Is that something that you think would be reasonable on your?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, of course. Ideally, if we,
I'm sorry, I know it's been frustrating, but if you could come up and talk into the microphone.
So just so I understand the process then, so it'd be, so we would come back and
You would
give
come
us-
back to Kate and Carlos.
Okay, give and give you a study, and then it gets distributed to the
Either
board?
that, or Cade makes the call, or Cade would circulate it as.
We will probably talk to no more than two commissioners to see if there's a consensus whether or not what you propose is feasible or not.
You know, you could come back to them and propose screening that with tall evergreen bushes.
Yeah.
And do it, but I would recommend doing it symmetrically on either side of the stair as it exists.
Yeah, I think that's something that we can.
That would be
we can do and
acceptable
work
for
with
you?
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
And,
And that just runs concurrently with the rest of the process, so that can live independently. I don't see that would,
Okay.
add any variations or change the public notice request or
Okay,
anything.
understood.
Unless Adam feels differently.
Well, kind of the reason I got up is that it seems there's a potential for a setback violation to occur, although Mr. Cohen did bring up the idea of landscape screening, which kind of alleviated a little bit of that concern.
I think the idea that it's just kind of looking at screening and restoring symmetry generally and seeing if we can just kind of study that and find a resolution. And it might be that there is no resolution. This might be the most sensitive resolution, but just, I think, continuing to work with us.
And so I'm 100% clear. So the aversion is just to the mechanics of it, because obviously now you're going to see a wall, right? So there's something there.
I think it's the symmetry and the balance of that front facade as well that was.
Got it, okay.
Okay, if
But
that,
sorry, I just want to make sure, like, the architects will make a good faith effort rather than saying, it's impossible, we've studied it. Like, I keep hearing, we've tried X, Y, Z and the other. I just want to hear you say, yeah, we're going to really try to get the symmetry and.
Of course, I mean, we want a good project. I mean, we're not here to just.
I jokingly said to Cade, maybe they could do symmetrical lifts so that you can approach them from the north and from the south.
Of course, I mean, we want this to be successful.
That
I
was
think
a joke.
I think Cade will do a good job at making sure that. So, okay, with that said, I would love to have a commissioner make a motion with the condition that the lift will be, a visual screen for the lift will be evaluated with administrative review. Is there a commissioner that, Commissioner Simon?
Wait, just one comment for the motion. Could we also say that a requirement would be a good effort at salvaging the wreath features on site in some manner?
Yeah, I think we can make a recommendation.
Okay, a recommendation, yeah. I just feel like, I mean, on a Masonic temple of all things, everything about that design was intentional and most likely symbolic. So I just, if it can stay on site, all the better.
So we can make the condition on the visual screening and then a recommendation to salvage the wreaths.
All right.
Okay, Commissioner Simon.
Okay, so I move we issue a certificate of appropriateness for 1453 Maple Avenue. It's a landmark property, case 22 Pres 0173, to alter the structure south, north, and east elevations fenestration, construct a single-story trash enclosure at the east elevation, construct an accessible lift at the west elevation, and install rooftop mechanicals on the northeast corners of the rearmost 30 feet, with the requirement that the applicant submit for administrative review a plan for visual screening of the accessible lift, potentially, including symmetrical treatment of both sides, and that also that they present for administrative review a plan to restore, to preserve at least some of the wreath elements in an appropriate way. And the motion's in accordance with standards for alteration 1 through 10 and standards for construction 1 through 8 and 10 through 15.
Is there a second? Jamie seconds. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? And Commissioner Jacobs is recused. So Mark's going to make a separate motion here for the zoning. Are we going to recommend that they,
You can make recommendations that aren't in the affirmative or that, you can say that you recommend
a closer
they present
evaluation?
additional information or something to determine the financial solvency or something. That seemed to be one of the concerns that there is.
I'm just having a hard time tying that to preservation. It is there's some potential relationship, but I think it's a little hard. It sounds kind of like lecturing the zoning.
And I think the Land Use Commission's going to do that regardless.
I think I
So-
don't think they'll particularly appreciate
We
our
might as well
help.
stay in our lane.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, okay. So is it even a motion to,
I don't think you have to make,
If you're not.
You are empowered to make recommendations. You are not obligated to make.
should we vote on it, though? Should I make some kind of motion that we decline to vote on? Or can you just report that the commission declined to make a motion for or against
I
it?
feel like you don't need, if we don't make a motion, we don't make a motion. If another member of the commission feels like we should, then they're free to make a motion of their own.
You know, why don't we just, I think, in case they ask, did they rule, and I think we should just make a motion that we decline, we agree we decline to make a recommendation for or against the major zoning variances. Is
Do
that
we just
okay?
make a note that we do not feel that it pertains to preservation standards? Or
I don't know that we should give up our power like that. No, I
It isn't giving up our
feel like Stuart had
power.
some good feedback, and I don't know that I think this is built in so that they get feedback from a different direction. I don't know. I don't know how it ties to like all of that. I don't think it's even articulated that well in here, like that it has to tie back. I didn't read that anywhere really, but I think we should give the feedback. They can do what they want with that. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah, I feel like you could say that you don't feel like the standards that you are reviewing, these specific variations, apply to the exterior alterations that are being proposed. I don't think that that's an issue, and you aren't necessarily giving up your power. You always are empowered to make these recommendations if you so choose. The only thing that I could see is that they may be interested generally to know your opinion if you feel like these variations are necessary for the adaptive use to be successful, and I think you said that you just didn't have enough information to. And that's part of the public record that they'll review as well, and that can be in that staff report. That.
Okay, so do we need to make a motion or an official statement to preserve that information, or is that something you can just write up that was our decision?
I think it's been deliberated on so much already that there's a really extensive body of testimony that the commission has given as to their rationale for not provide in it that I don't know that you need
Okay.
to make a separate motion.
Okay, so we won't make a motion for zoning.
But to Cade, sorry, I don't know, does land use even watch these? I don't think that they get the sound bite. Like, I think they get the bullet points, like,
Well, they'll-
yes, no, the other. That's
They'll-
why I think it
they'll
might
have
be
the
important.
minutes. They'll have the minutes that are attached to their case, and then there will also be a section in their staff report that talks about the deliberation that occurred with this body.
I'm just speaking from experience. I've gone in front of land use before, and I know they don't always read everything. Like, I know for a fact they don't. So I would suggest making it really easy. If you feel strongly, you should put it in either a motion or a sound bite, because I don't think they're going to read. Not everybody. I shouldn't. I know not everybody reads it. And that's been my experience when I've gone in front of them.
I think my opinion would be to let staff handle it. I think that the commissions are going to speak pretty freely from staff. So I think the staff report. I know that we've had this item where our commission findings have gone to city council for things such as other cases, and I do think that when the staff reports are attached, I do think that they look at them. I mean, we can't force them to look at documents if they're not going to look at documents, so.
And if it helps you, I will be the staff member that presents this case to the Land Use Commission, so I'm very
So you'll
prepared to
relay.
speak
Yeah,
to
that's
what the
what,
concerns were.
I just know that things go further when it's like either, broken down really in bite-sized pieces, or someone actually speaks it into the record at the meeting. Otherwise, it's sometimes lost. That's all I was trying to get at.
Yeah, and I think to Mark's point, I mean, yes, the statement has already been made. I think that this body does not feel like the variations requested are necessary in order to advance the exterior alterations that are being proposed. And I can think of situations where they would be, where you could say that, yes, in order to restore something that was an original feature, like a front porch or something on a home, and now it encroaches on the front yard setback, you may make a recommendation that, yes, that should be approved because it is in the interest of historic conservation of that specific building, but I think that your points are very valid in this case.
Okay, so you have an approved motion with the condition, so I'm sure we will look forward to seeing your studies on that. Okay? Okay, Mr. Sterling, if you would like to move on to the meeting minutes, please.
Okay, and I'll just mention to Adam, and we'll be in touch to kind of discuss everything in next steps as well. So, okay, we're going to move on to some items that we can hopefully get through relatively quickly. The minutes of September 13th. I did not receive any comments from any members. Does anyone have any revisions, or would someone like to make a motion to approve as presented?
I'll move to approve.
Is there a second? Commissioner Cohen seconds. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed or abstaining? Commissioner Morris abstains. Okay, moving on to staff reports.
Okay, staff reports. These are relatively quick. I just want to keep everyone informed of next steps with these. The Legacy Business Program, the latest with that is that we issued an RFP from the city for website and also design services for identification and promotional materials, including like a plaque for these businesses. We're still receiving responses. I think the RFP is still open, and I think that we would expect that person to be selected, and then that process to be kind of fulfilled by sometime in early spring, April or May. Next steps with that are going to be reviewing primarily the program administration, so who reviews the nominations and who administers the financial framework. The financial incentive framework is pretty tied directly to a current budget request with the city. So, if that gets approved, that'll structure that in a much more significant way than if it's disapproved. So there's some questions with that. And the Downtown Heritage Resource Survey. We completed the last of the 3 surveys. We've compiled all the reports, and we're starting to kind of digitize that and create a report with some recommendations, and that will come back to the commission probably in December. And then the motion for that would probably just to be to accept it and hold it on file as a resource. And then we can move into discussion. I didn't receive any additional comments on the Preserve 2040 plan. I did send out the document to representatives from Landmarks Illinois and received some good feedback. I sent it out to the State Historic Preservation Office for feedback. And then we also circulated that document with about 30 or 35 former commissioners and received feedback from probably 5 or 10 so far. So all of that has been good feedback. They've had some nice suggested changes. A lot of it comes with just kind of organizational structure of the document seems to be a common theme about wanting to understand the priorities or the timeline for some of these initiatives in a more visual way or easier way to understand who would be responsible and kind of what maybe the burden of the workload looks like from, year 1 to 3, year 5 to 10 to see if it's, kind of a realistic framework for implementation. So I don't know if anyone else has any discussion on that right now. Otherwise, I would just say continue to just send me your feedback, and I'll probably send a revised draft by the next meeting is what I would shoot for, and then you'll have something to kind of chew on and then maybe look at approving the document in December or January.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would just ask if possible, I don't know about your timing, but if you could send that out like a week prior to the big packet for the week.
Yeah.
I just ran out of time and wasn't able to.
Yeah, it's like,
look at
yeah,
it again.
yeah. Look at the 200 pages in the packet and then the 100-page document on top of it. It's a big ask for sure. So yeah, we can do that, absolutely. And then the last one on here, I'll let Carlos cover, but the Heritage Resource Design Manual, this is something we looked at much earlier, and then it was kind of put on hold, and now I think it's revived in a slightly different version, so I'll let Carlos speak to that.
Thank you, Kate. So some time ago, staff was asked to develop design guidelines for the benefit of helping applicants be more successful with their projects. And we gathered a subcommittee composed by Stuart, Jamie, and Julie Hacker, and also Kate, and we started looking at them. But then as we met, there were certain issues that particularly Julie Hacker and Stuart were concerned about with the previous design guidelines that were published online and then were no longer available. So we decided to restore those because they provided not necessarily design guidelines, but how to obtain the certificate of appropriateness as a process. So they mentioned design guidelines, but they didn't have design guidelines. So we put that back. And then one of the recommendations from the subcommittee was that instead of us getting every so often to look at a chapter, they wanted to see a document that is completed from beginning to end so that they can actually have a more comprehensive review and then more comprehensive feedback. So we are about ready to submit that to this subcommittee for their additional comments, and then once they provide that, we will bring it to the commission as a draft of the document to present this, as Kate did previously with the Preserve 2040, and then adopt the, now it's called the Heritage Resource Design Manual. I think that we try to kind of be more kind of friendly about even the title. And what it is, just to give an example, is we kind of show the path, how to move from point A to point B, if you're doing alteration, if you're doing addition and construction, and those 3 areas that are the most sought after type of certificate of appropriateness. We tried to stay local. We took pictures of local examples, like the roof materials or how additions work with the roof lines, so that we can show that we actually are looking at real projects rather than just something that is written. I don't think we're able to illustrate every single paragraph, but enough to give the user, in this case would be the owner or the architect or the contractor. So this is not something that the commission has to monitor or review, or it's not a set of standards. It's basically showing how can you get from point A to point B. And we will continue reviewing this document as things would appear new to us, like maybe new materials, new technologies, new approaches to historic preservation. We want to make this like a document that is not just sitting on the shelf, and it will be available online. You can download it by sections rather than the whole document. And there's also access to staff. So that's the idea. So within the next, I would say 5 to 10 business days, you will receive the first complete document, and then I will ask you to give your feedback, comments. We'll incorporate those, and then we'll submit it to the commission also for an additional review. So we hope that this will help more than anybody else, the owner, applicant, architect, contractor, more than us, because we are administering the ordinance. We have a lot of time today spent just trying to figure out what these standards are all about. But I think this document is more like, this is the way you would approach an alteration or an addition or construction. So that's basically the report for today.
Thank you. Cade, Carlos? Okay. Then Carl?
I make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
All in favor? Aye.
Was there a second?
Oh, you want to, do we need a second?
Bet second.
Stuart, that's.
Bet is closer.
We're so quick and tired.